A trail of blood in the snow led a Navy SEAL to a mother German shepherd carrying her dying puppy. She wasn't running from the cold. She was running from something far more terrifying beneath Silverpine Mountain. What he uncovered would force an entire town to choose between the truth and its future. Sometimes, the smallest miracle arrives on 4 trembling legs. Stay with me until the very end, because this journey is filled with loyalty, courage, and second chances. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, or share your thoughts after the story. And please like and subscribe to The Last Seal Shepherd to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and inspire more unforgettable stories. After the storm, Clearwater Bend looked almost forgiven. Snow lay over the northern Idaho Valley in smooth white layers, softening the hard angles of roofs, fences, broken sheds, and the old mining road that climbed toward Silverpine Ridge. Pine branches bent beneath the weight, their dark needles showing through like green veins under pale skin. The sky above the mountains was bright and cold, the kind of blue that made every shadow look sharper. Callan Voss stood on the porch of his cabin and listened to the silence. At 33, Callan still carried the shape of the Navy SEAL he had once been. He stood 6 feet tall, a compact, lean strength held tight under old discipline rather than showy muscle. His face was clean-shaven, angular, with a square jaw, clear cheekbones, and gray-blue eyes that seemed built for distant horizons and bad weather. His dark brown hair was cut in a neat military style, just a little longer than regulation, as if even his hair had learned to obey without looking too eager. His fair skin had been windburned by northern winters until it held a permanent roughness at the edges. He wore the same clothes he wore most days, an old olive-gray tactical combat shirt, frayed slightly at the shoulders and cuffs, worn earth-brown and moss-green combat pants, old brown military work boots, and a black military watch on his left wrist. The watch still kept perfect time. Callan did not trust many things that did. His cabin sat alone on the edge of Clearwater Bend, where the forest began to swallow the last mailboxes and the road narrowed into tire tracks. He had bought it after leaving the service, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because no one came there unless they had a reason. No neighbors dropping by with pie, no children cutting across the yard, no dog barking on the porch, no one depending on him before sunrise. That had been the point. The furnace coughed behind him from inside the cabin, then rattled in its metal housing like an old man clearing his throat before delivering bad news. Callan turned his head and stared through the open door. "You and I had an agreement," he said. The furnace clanked again. Callan looked up at the roofline. A thin strip of ice hung from the gutter, and beneath it, a patch of damp wood showed where the roof had started leaking during the night. It was not enough to be an emergency. Not yet. But winter had a gift for turning not yet into too late while a man slept. That was why he had accepted the job from the town council. After the blizzard, someone needed to inspect the old warning fence and the storage shed roof near the abandoned Silverpine mine. The council usually hired younger men from town for that kind of work, but both of them had been sent to clear fallen trees near the county road. Callan knew old structures. He knew unstable timber, load-bearing cracks, bad snow weight, and the kind of quiet that came before collapse. So they called him. He almost said no. Then the furnace coughed like it had heard him thinking. Now he drove his old pickup north along Silverpine Mine Road, the chains on the tires clicking softly through packed snow. The road wound between walls of pine and birch, climbing toward the ridge where the mine entrances sat sealed behind rusted gates. Silverpine had been closed for decades, but the town still kept the sign standing for insurance, memory, and the small comfort of pretending old dangers stayed where people left them. Callan did not believe in that comfort. Old dangers moved. Sometimes they moved inside men. Sometimes they slept under snow. The sun had climbed high enough to turn the road bright, but not warm. Snow flashed across his windshield in hard white sparks. He parked near the first warning fence and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. The mine road was supposed to be empty. It was not. At first, he did not see tracks. He saw color. A dark red line crossed the snow near the bend ahead, too sharp, too deliberate against all that white. Callan killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed against the cab windows. He got out slowly. The cold struck his face and slid under the collar of his combat shirt. He ignored it and crouched beside the mark. 3 drops of blood had sunk into the powder, their edges feathered by frost. A few feet farther on, another drop, then another. Beside the blood, the snow had been disturbed by paw prints. Large dog, uneven gait, one rear leg weak. There was also a shallow furrow beside the prints, narrow and broken, as if something small had been carried low or dragged only when strength failed. Callan removed one glove and touched the snow near the impression. The top layer had not fully crusted. Fresh. Less than an hour old, maybe less than 30 minutes, depending on the wind. He looked toward the trees. The forest beyond the road stood still but not peaceful. Pine trunks rose in dark columns. Snow clung to their branches in thick white shelves. Somewhere inside that stillness, something had passed, bleeding, limping, carrying weight it should not have been able to carry. A deer would have fled downhill. A wolf would not have left prints like that. A dog. Callan reached into the truck for the emergency kit, a folded tarp, a small wool blanket, and a packet of jerky from the glove compartment. His hand paused over the catchpole strapped behind the seat. It was there for injured animals. Sensible. Safe. The sort of tool a man used when he wanted distance between compassion and teeth. He left it where it was. Easy way to lose a hand, he muttered. Then he stepped off the road and followed the blood. The trail led through shallow drifts beneath the pines. Callan moved slowly, placing each boot where the snow would hold. He kept his body turned slightly sideways, a habit from both animal rescue and close-quarters work. Never square yourself to fear unless you want fear to think you are coming to conquer it. The paw prints staggered. Here the dog had moved quickly. There it had fallen. A smear showed where one hip had dragged against the snow. Then the prints returned. Callan felt something tighten under his ribs. He had seen that pattern before, though not always in animals. Bodies did that when they were finished but refused to stop. Men did it in burning buildings. Soldiers did it under fire. Parents did it when they heard a child crying. The body announced surrender, and the heart filed an appeal. A faint sound came from ahead, not a bark, not a whine. A thin, broken note almost swallowed by the trees. Callan froze. The sound came again. A puppy. He moved forward slower now and rounded a cluster of snow-heavy furs. The German shepherd stood in the middle of a narrow clearing. She was black and tan beneath the snow and dirt, though hunger had sharpened every line of her body. Her black saddle ran along her back like a dark cloak, while her legs and chest showed warm brown under the frost. Her muzzle was darker, with a faint silvering around it that made her look older than her 7 years. Her amber-brown eyes burned with intelligence and terror. One ear stood high and alert. The other had a small tear along the outer edge and tilted when her strength wavered. A dark leather collar circled her neck. It was old, brown, and worn deeply into the fur, leaving a rubbed band that spoke of too many days tied to something that did not care whether she breathed. Her left hip was torn open. Blood had frozen into the fur around the wound. One rear leg trembled beneath her, yet she did not set down the tiny puppy hanging carefully from her mouth. The puppy was impossibly small, only a few weeks old, with pale golden-brown fur, a black smudge on its forehead, and one cream-colored front paw. It hung from the loose skin at its neck, carried with a care so absolute it seemed almost holy. The shepherd saw Callan. A growl rose from her chest. It was not strong. That made it worse. Strong growls warned. This one pleaded without knowing how. Callan stopped immediately and lowered his eyes, not enough to look submissive, but enough not to challenge her. He had not owned a dog in years. He had not wanted one. Animals had a way of entering a house and rearranging the heart before a man noticed the furniture had moved. "Easy," he said quietly. "I see you." The shepherd shifted. Her injured leg buckled. She caught herself before the puppy touched the snow. Callan felt his breath catch. She turned her wounded side away from him and placed her body between the man and the pup. The movement cost her. He saw it in the tremor along her flank, in the tightening of her jaw around the puppy's scruff, in the way her eyes flicked once toward the dark shape of the old mine entrance beyond the trees. That look was brief, but Callan saw it. The sealed mine gate stood half-hidden behind brush and snow, a rusted mouth in the slope. Warning signs hung crooked from wire. Beyond them, darkness gathered in the old opening like a thought no one wanted to finish. The shepherd was not only watching Callan, she was watching behind her. Callan set the tarp down slowly. "I'm not taking him from you," he said, though he knew she could not understand the words. Tone mattered more, breath mattered, distance mattered. "But he's cold. You know that," the dog growled again. The puppy made a faint sound. The shepherd's eyes changed, only for a second. Fear cracked and something deeper showed through. Not trust, not yet, but a terrible calculation. The mother was measuring the distance between danger and survival. Callan backed away. He returned to the truck, never turning his back fully. From the bed, he took the folded tarp, a foam tool case, and a small emergency blanket. He also took off his outer canvas jacket, though the cold immediately bit through the old tactical shirt beneath. He built the shelter in plain sight. No sudden movements. Tool case on its side to block the wind. Tarp angled against a snowbank. Jacket spread open on the ground, lining up, emergency blanket partly folded beneath it. He placed the jerky far to one side, then changed his mind, dug into his lunch tin, and pulled out plain roasted chicken instead. "Jerky's too salty," he said, mostly to hear a human voice. The shepherd watched everything. Callan set the chicken several feet from the jacket, then sat down in the snow with his shoulder turned toward her. His left knee protested immediately. Old injuries had their own weather reports. He waited. Waiting had once been the thing that ruined him. Years earlier, in a city half a world away, Callan had stood outside a damaged concrete structure with his team stacked behind him. There had been civilians inside. He had known it. Everyone had known it. But the building groaned after the first breach attempt, and command wanted another assessment before entry. Callan had waited because waiting was procedure, because procedure kept teams alive, because brave men who ignored structural risk often became names carved into plaques. 15 minutes later, they went in. 15 minutes was enough time for a ceiling to fall. He never spoke about that day. Not to the Navy counselor, not to the chaplain, not to the one woman who had once tried to love him past it. He carried the memory the way some men carried shrapnel, not visible, but always shifting when the weather changed. Now a wounded dog stared at him through falling snow, and everything in him wanted to move. He did not. To rush her would be to make this moment about his guilt, so he waited differently. The wind moved through the trees. Snow slid from a branch with a soft thump. The puppy made another thin sound, and the mother's jaw tightened. Callan looked away from her eyes. "Your call," he whispered. The shepherd took one step, then stopped. Her injured leg shook violently. She lowered her head as if the puppy weighed as much as stone. Another step. Her nose flicked toward the chicken, but she did not go to it first. She moved toward the jacket. Callan kept still. The dog reached the edge of the tarp. For a moment she stood above the jacket, breathing hard through her nose. Her eyes moved from Callan to the fabric, then to the mine entrance, then back to the puppy in her mouth. She lowered the pup. But she did not let go. The tiny body touched the jacket lining. The mother's jaws remained closed around the scruff, gentle but fixed, as if some ancient command inside her insisted that survival meant never releasing what she had managed to keep alive. Callan's throat tightened. Then, finally, the shepherd opened her mouth. The puppy slid fully onto the jacket. One cream paw pressed weakly against the fabric. The mother swayed. She turned toward the chicken, took one step, and collapsed. Callan moved before thought could argue with him. He stopped 2 paces away, palms open, heart hammering. The shepherd's eyes fluttered but stayed fixed on him. Even half-conscious, she tried to lift her head toward the pup. "I know," Callan said. "I know." He pulled out his phone and called Dr. Elwyn Hart. Elwyn answered on the second ring. "If this is about your furnace, I told you last winter I don't treat machinery, Doctor." Elwyn Hart was 41, sharp-eyed, and difficult to impress. She had dark brown hair usually tied low at the neck, with a few silver strands that caught light when she worked. Her face held the calm severity of a woman who had been bitten, lied to, underpaid, and still chosen to keep healing things. Before opening her small clinic in Clearwater Bend, she had worked with military working dogs and rescue animals, which meant she understood both teeth and trauma better than most people understood either. Adult female German shepherd, Callan said. Severe malnutrition, hip wound, puppy alive but cold, found near Silverpine. The teasing vanished from her voice. "Is the mother conscious?" "Barely." "Is she aggressive?" "She's a mother." "That's not an answer. It's the only accurate one." A pause. Then Elwyn said, "Do not carry her barehanded. I know. You knowing things has never guaranteed civilized behavior." Despite the cold, something almost like a smile touched his mouth. "I built a windbreak." "Of course you did. Keep the puppy warm. Do not separate them more than necessary. I'm on my way." The call ended. Callan looked at the shepherd. Her breathing was shallow. The puppy squirmed weakly on the jacket, blind to the world except warmth and absence. Callan eased the emergency blanket around the pup without lifting it far. The mother's lips twitched, but she could not rise. Then the rehook came in the form of something small enough to be dismissed, and strange enough that Callan never would. The puppy, barely stronger than a sigh, dragged its little cream paw across the inside of Callan's jacket. Under the paw, something caught the light. Not blood, not ice, but a smear of gray-black powder pressed into the lining from the pup's fur. Callan leaned closer. The powder smelled faintly metallic. Not mud, not ash from the forest, mine dust. The puppy had not just been carried through snow. It had been somewhere under stone, and the mother, half dead in front of him, had not fled from the forest. She had come out of the mountain. Callan slowly lifted his eyes toward the rusted Silverpine gate. The wind seemed to drop for one breath. From far inside the slope came a sound, metal against rock, once, then silence. The shepherd opened her eyes. She did not look at her puppy first. She looked at the mine. Callan felt the old world he had built around himself shift by a fraction of an inch. He was not a superstitious man. War had burned most easy beliefs out of him. But there were moments when the world arranged its signs with such terrible clarity that even a faithless man had to wonder whether mercy sometimes arrived, wounded, bleeding, and carrying proof in its mouth. He tucked the blanket more securely around the puppy. "You brought him out," he said softly to the mother. "What else did you bring?" The dog's eyes remained on the dark opening. Snow began falling again, light at first, small white flecks landing on her black saddle and torn ear. Callan reached for his jacket, then realized the puppy was lying on it. He left it there. The cold pressed deeper into his shoulders. The minutes before Elowen arrived felt longer than they were. Callan used the time to study what he could without disturbing the dog. The wound on her hip was jagged, not a clean bite. It looked like torn metal or splintered timber. Her paws were scraped raw in places. One nail had split. The leather collar around her neck showed old scratches near the buckle, as if something had once been clipped there and pulled hard, again and again. A working collar, not a family collar. The thought angered him, but anger was useless unless it learned to wait. The shepherd's breathing hitched. Callan shifted closer, then stopped when her eyes sharpened. "All right," he said. "Still your line." The puppy rooted blindly against the jacket, searching for warmth that was not there. Callan slid one hand under the edge of the blanket and cupped heat near the pup without taking it away from its mother. The little creature pressed against his fingers. Something inside Callan recoiled. Need was dangerous. Need had weight. It entered the hand first, then the arm, then the chest. A man could tell himself he was only helping for 1 hour, one night, one emergency. Then some small, helpless thing breathed against his palm, and the lie became harder to maintain. He looked away. Downhill, an engine growled. Elowen's clinic truck appeared between the trees, tires pushing through the snow with practiced impatience. She parked behind Callan's pickup and stepped out carrying a medical bag and a folded soft stretcher. She wore a navy parka over teal scrubs, dark waterproof pants, and black snow boots. Her hair was tucked under a gray knit cap, but a few dark strands escaped near her cheek. She took in the scene without wasting emotion on the obvious. "Hip wound," she said, crouching several feet away. "Dehydrated, starved. Nursing recently, one pup." Elowen's eyes flicked toward the blanket. "Only one that I found." Something tightened in her face, but she did not say what both of them knew. A mother that wounded, carrying one pup through snow, might have once had more. Elowen opened her kit. "How close did she let you?" "She chose the jacket." "That wasn't my question. It's the answer that matters." Elowen looked at him for a moment, then nodded. She had known Callan long enough not to mistake his quiet for peace. People in town called him reliable, which was what they called damaged men who showed up on time and did not ask for help. Together they worked slowly. Elowen warmed a small IV bag inside her coat. She prepared a mild sedative, then paused. "If she fights too hard, she'll tear that wound wider. She won't leave the pup." "No," Elowen said. "She won't." Callan shifted the tarp higher to block the wind. The shepherd watched him, eyes dim but wary. When Elowen moved in with the needle, the dog tried to lift her head and failed. A growl trembled in her throat. Callan lowered himself into the snow where she could see him. "No one takes him," he said. The shepherd's amber-brown eyes locked onto his. Elowen gave the injection. The dog's body fought sleep with everything it had left. Even as the sedative softened her muscles, her gaze kept returning to the puppy. Only when the pup squeaked under the blanket did her jaw relax fully, as if that tiny sound had given her permission to fall. Elowen exhaled. That dog should not be alive. Callan looked toward the mine gate. She had a reason. Elowen followed his gaze. "What happened up there?" "I don't know." The answer tasted false the moment he said it. Not because he knew the truth, but because the shape of it had already begun pressing against the day. They moved the mother onto the soft stretcher. Even unconscious, she seemed too light. Beneath the fur, her ribs rose like the slats of a broken crate. Elowen checked the puppy, wrapped him tighter, and placed him near the mother's muzzle so her scent would remain close. As Callan lifted one end of the stretcher, the shepherd stirred. Her eyes opened halfway. Again, she looked past him, toward the mine. Then the mountain made the sound a second time, metal. Far below stone. Elowen froze. "Tell me that was a tree." Callan listened. The forest held its breath around them. The old warning signs on the mine fence clicked softly in the wind. Snow drifted over the blood trail, already trying to erase the path the dog had carved through the world. "No," Callan said. The shepherd's eyes closed. Callan carried her toward the truck, careful with each step, feeling how little she weighed and how much had arrived with her. The puppy made one small sound from inside the blanket, a thread of life thin enough to break and stubborn enough not to. At the truck, Callan looked back once. The blood trail led from the mine road to the clearing, from darkness to snow, from whatever had been done in secret to the place where he now stood. He had spent years building a life where no one could come to his door needing rescue, but the mountain had sent a mother instead. And she had not come empty-handed. By the time Callan Voss carried the wounded German shepherd into his cabin, the afternoon light had turned the snow outside to silver. The cabin stood quiet beneath the pines, its roof patched in 2 places, its porch boards darkened by years of winter melt. Inside, the air smelled of firewood, old coffee, oiled tools, and cold leather. It was not a warm home in the way most people meant the word. It was a shelter built around one man's habits. One mug by the sink, one chair near the stove, one bed made military tight in the back room, one rifle locked away and never displayed, one narrow life arranged so nothing fragile could wander into it by accident. Now there was blood on his floor. Callan placed the soft stretcher beside the wood stove while Dr. Elowen Hart moved with controlled urgency behind him. She did not gasp when she saw the condition of the dog under better light. She did not curse. She only knelt, opened her medical bag, and became the kind of calm that frightened people trusted because it asked nothing from them. Elowen was 41, tall enough to meet most men's eyes without lifting her chin, with dark brown hair pulled into a low knot beneath a gray winter cap. A few silver strands had escaped near her temples. Her skin was fair but weathered from years of emergency calls through wind, mud, heat, and snow. Her eyes were a greenish gray, sharp at first glance but softer when they settled on an animal in pain. She wore a navy parka over teal scrubs, dark waterproof pants, black snow boots, and practical gloves already stained by the day's work. People in Clearwater Bend called her difficult. Callan had always thought that meant she refused to lie politely. "Blankets," she said. Callan moved before she finished the word. He pulled 2 wool blankets from the cedar chest near the wall and laid them beside her. He added an old towel, then another, because once a man had seen enough blood, he learned never to trust the first towel. Elowen glanced at him. "You still keep supplies like you're expecting a siege. I live alone." "That is not an answer. It's the one I have." She gave him no smile, but one corner of her mouth threatened the idea. The mother dog lay on her side, sedated but not peaceful. Her ribs rose too sharply under her black and tan coat. Her dark saddle, once likely glossy and strong, was dulled by dirt and melted ice. Her warm brown legs were scraped raw in places, and her chest rose in shallow pulls as if each breath had to be negotiated. The torn hip looked worse under lamplight. The wound was not only deep, it was ragged, as though something had caught flesh and ripped while she fought forward anyway. The puppy lay inside the emergency blanket near her muzzle. He was small enough that Callan could have held him in both hands, though he did not. Pale golden-brown fur covered his tiny body, with a black thumbprint of color between his eyes and one cream-colored front paw that kept escaping the fold of the blanket. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly before a thin squeak slipped out. The mother stirred. Even under sedation, she tried to move toward him. Elowen saw it. "Keep him close." Not on her wound side. Callan adjusted the blanket by inches. The mother's torn ear flicked once, then relaxed. "She knows where he is," Elowen murmured. "She hasn't stopped knowing." "No." Elowen's expression hardened as she began clipping fur around the hip wound. "That may be the only reason she's alive." Callan stood near the stove with his arms at his sides, feeling useless in the particular way that only disciplined men hated. He could clear a room, brace a damaged door, read stress in a beam, walk through sleet for miles, and keep his breathing level when the world became loud. But here, in his own mudroom, the battle belonged to a woman with a syringe, a needle driver, and hands steady enough to make pain wait its turn. He watched Elowen clean the wound. The dog did not wake fully, but her paws twitched against the towel. Her muzzle tightened whenever Elowen touched deeper tissue. Callan found his own jaw clenching in answer, as if pain could echo across species and find a matching bone. "She needs a name," Elowen said. "She has one somewhere. Maybe. But not from whoever did this." Callan looked down at the old leather collar. It was dark brown, cracked at the edges, rubbed nearly smooth where a leash or line had been clipped and pulled too many times. There was no tag. Outside the window beyond the porch, a cluster of thin birch trees bent beneath the snow. Their white trunks stood pale against the dark pine forest, bowed but not broken. "Sable," Callan said. Elowen looked up. "For the color, for what doesn't show until light hits it." For a moment she said nothing. Then she wrote the name on a strip of white medical tape and stuck it to the edge of her field chart. Sable, she repeated. The mother dog's ear shifted. Callan felt that small movement land somewhere inside him. He looked away. The puppy squeaked again. Elowen glanced at him. And him? Callan did not answer quickly enough. The puppy pushed his little cream paw into the blanket and made another indignant sound, as if offended by the entire arrangement of the universe. Elowen's face softened. Pip, Callan looked at her. He's barely a sound, she said, but he keeps making one. Pip squeaked again, proving the point with the gravity of a tiny prophet. Pip, Callan said. The name should have been too small for the room. Instead, it made the room feel larger. Elowen worked for nearly an hour. She flushed the wound, stitched what could be closed, packed what had to drain, and started fluids. She checked Sable's gums, temperature, pulse, and the old bruising beneath her coat. The more she examined, the less her expression allowed kindness to soften it. This tear is recent, she said. The rest isn't. Callan looked at her. Elowen lifted Sable's front leg gently, exposing a rubbed band near the lower joint. Restraint mark, not from one day. She checked the neck. Same here. The collar sat under tension for a long time. Tied, dragged, worked on a line, possibly confined. Her voice stayed clinical, but anger lived underneath it like fire under ash. She's severely underweight, dehydrated, nursing but not producing enough. That pup is alive because she carried him out before he got too cold. Callan looked at Pip. The puppy was breathing, but barely with confidence. Elowen warmed a small cloth and rubbed him gently, stimulating circulation. He needs heat, fluids, and luck. I've never liked luck. No one does until they need it. Callan said nothing. He turned toward the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. His hands wanted work. Work was safer than feeling. Work had edges, sequences, tools, outcomes. Feeling was snow over thin ice. Behind him, Elowen spoke more softly. Callan, he stopped. This is not a night and release situation. I know. Do you? He turned back. Elowen was looking at him now, not the dog. That was always more dangerous. She can't be moved much tonight, she said. Maybe tomorrow if she stabilizes. The pup may need to stay beside her. Stress could shut her down, and he needs her scent. Your cabin is closer than the clinic. Warmer right now, too, since my back room pipes are being dramatic again. You want them here. I want them alive. Callan looked at Sable, then Pip, then the single chair beside his stove. His cabin suddenly seemed full of things he had not agreed to. I can keep them tonight, he said. Elowen's gaze narrowed. Only tonight? That was the sentence. Your sentences often age poorly. He took 2 mugs from the cabinet, then realized he had only one clean. He washed another without comment. Elowen continued charting injuries. I'll document everything. Photos. Measurements. If someone claims ownership, we need a record. The word ownership tightened the air. Callan placed a mug near her. Someone did own her. Someone had possession. That is not the same thing. He leaned against the counter, arms folded. In the old life, ownership had meant equipment signed out and returned. Vehicles, weapons, radios, gear. In this room, applied to the breathing body beside his stove, the words seemed obscene. Elowen took the mug but did not drink. If a person comes looking, do not get heroic. I'm retired. That has never stopped you from doing stupid things with excellent posture. This time, Callan almost smiled. Almost. The evening lowered itself over the cabin. Outside, the snow reflected the last blue light of day. Inside, the stove clicked softly, and the old furnace gave occasional metallic complaints from the hall. Elowen stayed until Sable's temperature rose slightly, and Pip accepted a few drops from a syringe. The puppy fought the process with a wobbling determination that made Elowen whisper, "Good. Be angry. Angry things are often harder to kill." Callan pretended not to hear the tenderness under her words. When Elowen finally packed her bag, she paused at the door. Snow had begun falling again, soft and fine. "I'll come back before dawn," she said. "Call if her breathing changes. Call if the wound bleeds through. Call if the pup stops making noise. I know. And Callan?" He looked at her. She stood framed by the open door, navy parka dusted white, face tired but steady. Do not confuse distance with safety. It's only distance. Then she stepped out into the snow. Callan closed the door and stood with his palm against the wood longer than necessary. The cabin became quiet again, but it was not the same quiet. Sable lay near the stove, wrapped in blankets, Pip tucked near her chest. The mother's muzzle rested close enough to feel the puppy move. Callan lowered himself into the chair across from them. His wet boots left dark marks on the floor. He told himself he would stay awake for medical reasons. That was cleaner than admitting he could not leave them alone. The hours passed in small sounds. Pip squeaked. The stove breathed. Sable's claws twitched once against the blanket. The furnace coughed from the hall, and Callan muttered, "Don't start." Near midnight, He rose to add wood to the stove. He moved quietly, but Sable's eyes opened. Not wide, not panicked, just aware. "Easy," he said. Her amber eyes followed his hand to the wood, then to the stove, then back to Pip. "You're thorough," he murmured. Sable blinked once. It was not trust, but it was not teeth. Callan fed the stove and returned to the chair. He did not reach toward her. He did not offer comfort she had not asked for. People were fond of forcing comfort on the wounded, as if gentleness excused trespass. He understood borders. His own had become walls. Sometime after 1 in the morning, sleep reached for him and failed. He sat with elbows on knees, black watch face catching firelight. He saw not the cabin, but a damaged building under another sky. Dust, concrete, a radio cutting in and out, men looking at him for the decision. His own voice saying they would wait for confirmation. 15 minutes. Time was strange. It could pass and remain. Pip squeaked. Callan came back to Idaho. Sable had lifted her head. Her body trembled with effort. At first, Callan thought she was checking the pup. Then he heard it, a low thump from far away. Not thunder. Too deep for a falling tree. The cabin windows gave the faintest shiver. Sable surged upright. Pain should have stopped her. Sedation should have slowed her. The stitched wound should have made movement impossible. But terror lent her a terrible strength. She staggered across the blanket, nearly fell, caught herself, and lunged toward the front window. Sable, Callan, stood, but did not rush her. She hit the window with both front paws. Her claws scraped glass. One split at the tip and left a bright red mark on the sill. Her breath fogged the pain. She was not looking at the yard, not at the truck, not at Callan. She was looking past the pines, toward Silverpine Ridge. Pip cried behind her. The sound tore through the room like a thread pulled too hard. Sable turned so fast her rear leg buckled. For one suspended moment, she stood between the window and the puppy, head swinging from mountain darkness to small life. The choice broke across her face in a way Callan felt more than saw. The rehook arrived in that silence. Sable did something no frightened stray should have known to do. She stepped back from the window, limped to Pip, nudged him once with her muzzle, then dragged the edge of the blanket with her teeth until it covered him more fully. Only after the puppy was hidden beneath warmth did she turn back toward the window and place herself between the glass and the nest. Not between Callan and the puppy, between the mountain and the puppy. Callan stood motionless. The gesture was too deliberate to be panic, too protective to be habit. It was as if Sable believed the danger beyond the ridge could reach through walls, through snow, through darkness, and that her broken body was still the only gate. For the first time, Callan wondered whether she had not come to his cabin because it was closest. Maybe she had chosen it because it was the first light she found, or because some wounded part of the world had recognized another. The thought made him angry, not because it was foolish, because it touched belief. Callan did not move until Sable's breathing began to slow. He approached only far enough to place a chair near the window, then sat sideways between her and the room, not blocking her view, not taking command, simply sharing the watch. "It's all right," he said, though it was not. Sable did not look at him. Pip went quiet beneath the blanket. The mountain kept whatever secret it had swallowed. Near dawn, Elowen returned. She found Callan still sitting beside the window, and Sable lying on the floor nearby, eyes half open, exhausted but unwilling to sleep. Elowen entered without knocking, as people did when they knew life was ahead of manners. Her boots carried snow onto the mat. Her hair was looser than before, and the skin beneath her eyes had darkened with fatigue. "She moved?" she asked after one look. "After a thump from the ridge." "What kind of thump?" "The kind people explain badly later." Elowen knelt beside Sable and inspected the bandage. Blood had seeped through one edge. "Damn it!" She hit the window. Elowen looked up sharply. "She was looking toward the mine," Callan said. Elowen did not dismiss it. That was one reason he respected her. She did not believe every wild conclusion, but she never insulted evidence simply because it arrived on 4 legs. She changed the bandage, checked the split claw, and examined Pip. The puppy complained louder this time, a tiny, offended squeal that made Elowen's shoulders loosen. "He's stronger," she said. "That sounded strong to you?" "That sounded alive." Callan watched Sable. "What happens now?" "Medically, she stays quiet, eats small amounts. No stares, no stress, no heroic window attacks. And legally," Elowen's mouth tightened, "I file a suspected cruelty report. I send photos to county animal control. I check for a microchip when she's stable enough. If there's an owner, then things become complicated." Callan looked at the dog lying near his stove, the puppy tucked against her chest. "Complicated isn't the same as uncertain." "No," Elowen said, "but don't confuse what you feel with what the law will do." He looked at her. She packed away the used gauze. "You're very good at standing in front of danger. less good at standing inside slow systems. I'm not standing inside anything. Elowen looked around the cabin. The blankets, the medical tape, the water bowl Callan had placed too far from the dog, and then moved closer inch by inch, the chair beside the window. Of course not, she said. The next 3 days measured themselves in small victories. Sable drank water from a shallow pan without flinching when Callan stepped away. Pip latched long enough to nurse, then fell asleep with his cream paw pressed against his mother's chest. Sable accepted soft food only after Callan placed it down and retreated 3 full paces. If he forgot and stayed too close, she froze until he remembered her rules. He remembered quickly. Callan kept the cabin warmer than usual, though the furnace rattled with increasing resentment. He slept in pieces on the chair, waking whenever Pip made a sound or Sable shifted. He told himself this was temporary. He told himself Elowen would transfer them to the clinic soon. He told himself many things, and none of them changed the way he paused before stepping over the loose floorboard because the creak made Sable's ears flatten. Outside, Clearwater Bend continued pretending to be ordinary. Snowplows scraped the main road. Smoke rose from chimneys. Men in insulated jackets bought coffee at the gas station and discussed the weather as if weather were not a beast with teeth. Somewhere beyond the ridge, engines worked now and then, distant enough to be deniable, steady enough not to be imagined. Each time that far mechanical sound reached the cabin, Sable changed. A diesel engine low on the road made her body sink. Metal striking metal made her lips pull tight. A faint drilling vibration, almost too soft for Callan to hear, brought her to the front door. Not running, not hiding, standing, looking, waiting for him to understand. On the 3rd afternoon, Callan found her upright before the door, breathing hard. Pip slept in the nest near the stove. The day outside was bright, the snow nearly blinding under pale sunlight. Silverpine Ridge rose beyond the trees, white and blue and innocent as a church painting. Sable looked back at Callan. There was no pleading in her amber eyes. That was what unsettled him. Begging would have been easier to refuse. This was invitation, or accusation, or both. Callan stood in the middle of the room with a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. The old life inside him offered its usual instructions. Call the sheriff. Call the town. Call someone whose job this is. Keep your distance. He looked at Pip, whose tiny body rose and fell beneath the blanket. Then at Sable, who had crossed blood, snow, pain, and fear to bring that small life out of the mountain's reach. I'm not going up there, Callan said. Sable did not move. I'm not. The furnace clanked from the hall, a ridiculous little sound in a room too full of larger truths. Callan set the coffee down. Sable lowered her head slightly, not in defeat, but as if she had expected men to need more time. That bothered him most. By evening, Elowen returned with more supplies and a printed cruelty form clipped to a board. She found Callan standing at the window. She's doing it again, Elowen asked. Yes. Looking toward the ridge? Yes. Elowen came to stand beside him. Outside, twilight gathered between the trees. She may be reacting to trauma, she said. Associations, sounds, smell, direction. Dogs remember through the body. I know, but? Callan's eyes stayed on the darkening slope. But bodies remember real things. Elowen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, if you decide to ask questions, start with old mine records. Not the ridge, not alone. There's a man named Harlan Mott who used to maintain Silverpine before the closure. He knows more about that mountain than the town map does. Callan looked at her. I'm not telling you to go, Elowen said. I'm telling you not to be stupid if you do. Sable remained by the door. Pip squeaked in his sleep. Callan closed his eyes for one breath. He had spent years making his life small enough to survive. One chair, one mug, one man, no need, no promises, no living thing waiting for him to come back. Then a wounded mother dog had walked out of the snow and placed a future on his jacket. When he opened his eyes, he still had not decided. But the lie was gone. Sable was not merely lost. She was not merely afraid. And whatever had happened at Silverpine Ridge had followed her down the mountain like a shadow waiting for someone human to finally turn around. 5 days passed before Sable stood without falling. She did not stand well. Her left hip still dipped when she shifted her weight, and the stitched wound beneath the clean bandage pulled at her whenever she moved too fast. But on the 5th morning, while pale winter light spread across the cabin floor, she pushed herself up from the blanket nest beside the stove and remained on all 4 feet. Callan Voss saw it from the kitchen table. He did not cheer. He had learned that wounded creatures did not always trust celebration. Sometimes a raised voice, even a happy one, sounded too much like danger arriving with different intentions. So he only lowered his coffee mug and said, "There you are." Sable turned her head toward him. She was still too thin. Her black and tan German Shepherd coat hung loosely over ribs that had begun, barely, to soften under regular meals. The black saddle across her back looked cleaner now, brushed carefully by Dr. Elowen Hart during the last bandage change. Her warm brown chest and legs had regained a little color beneath the dullness of hunger. Her darker muzzle, touched with faint silver, made her amber-brown eyes seem even more watchful. One ear stood tall, the torn ear tilted outward, giving her face a permanent expression of having survived an argument with the world and not yet decided whether the world was forgiven. Pip slept near her front legs, curled into a small golden-brown comma of life. He had become louder. Not strong, not yet, but louder. His tiny black forehead smudge wrinkled whenever Elowen fed him from a syringe, and his cream-colored paw escaped every blanket, as if determined to claim territory before his eyes had fully learned what territory was. Callan had seen men take hills with less confidence than that puppy used to push his nose into folds of wool. Sable looked down at Pip, then back at Callan. "Don't look at me," Callan said. "He gets the stubbornness from your side." Pip squeaked in his sleep. Callan took that as disagreement. The cabin had changed in 5 days, though Callan had tried not to admit it. A shallow water pan sat near the stove. A stack of clean towels rested on the chair that had once been his. A line of medicine bottles stood on the counter beside his coffee tin. The old room, built around one man's resistance to need, now contained schedules: feeding, cleaning, warming, checking, waiting. Need had entered quietly. Then it had left paw prints everywhere. Callan told himself this was temporary. Sable would stabilize. Pip would grow stronger. Elowen would transfer them to the clinic when moving them no longer risked breaking whatever fragile thread kept the mother calm. Temporary was a useful word. It let a man care without confessing that he cared. The furnace coughed from the hall with a metallic rattle. Sable's ears flicked. Callan leaned back in his chair. "That one's not the mountain. That's just my house trying to die with dignity." Sable did not seem comforted. Neither was he. Before noon, Elowen arrived for the second check of the day. She entered with her usual combination of impatience and mercy, carrying a worn leather medical bag in one hand and a paper sack from the bakery in the other. Snow dusted the shoulders of her navy parka. Her dark hair, tied low, had loosened around her face in tired strands. She looked like a woman who had been awake longer than she would admit and useful longer than anyone deserved. "I brought bread," she said. "Not for you." Callan looked at the sack. "Good. I was worried I might enjoy something." Elowen ignored him and crossed to Sable. The dog stiffened at first, then allowed the veterinarian to kneel nearby. That, too, was progress. On the first day, Sable had watched every human hand like it might become a weapon. Now she watched Elowen's hands as if they were suspicious tools that had, so far, made acceptable choices. Elowen checked the bandage, gums, hydration, and temperature. She handled Pip with gentleness disguised as efficiency. "He's gained a little," she said. "How little?" "Enough to make me less unpleasant." "That's measurable. Ask around." Callan did not smile, but the cabin warmed by 1/2 degree. Elowen finished noting the numbers on her chart. "She needs another week before I'd call her stable. Maybe more. But she's fighting. She's been doing that. Fighting to survive is one thing. Fighting to heal is different." Callan looked at Sable. The dog had lowered herself again, but she had not collapsed. Her body lay around Pip in a crescent, her nose close enough to feel his breath. Every so often, her eyes moved toward the door. Not in panic, in assessment. "She still looks at the ridge," Callan said. Elowen's pen stopped. Every time an engine climbs the north road, every metallic sound, every distant vibration. Elowen resumed writing, slower now. "Trauma can point in a direction. That doesn't make the direction imaginary." "No," Elowen closed the chart. "It doesn't." Before she could say more, Sable lifted her head not toward the ridge, toward the road. A faint engine sound pushed through the trees, rougher than Elowen's clinic truck, lower and older. Tires crunched snow on the cabin road, too fast for someone cautious and too slow for someone lost. Callan turned toward the window. A red pickup came around the bend. It had once been bright, maybe proud, but years of salt and neglect had turned it into a thing of mismatched panels, rusted edges, and one headlight sitting lower than the other like a broken eye. The windshield was cracked across the passenger side. Orange mud had frozen along the wheel wells. Sable changed before the truck stopped. Her body flattened. The reaction was not ordinary fear. It was recognition traveling through muscle before thought could dress it in reason. Her ears pulled back. Her injured hip trembled. She drew Pip beneath her neck with one slow movement, careful not to crush him. Her lips did not curl yet, but the air in the room tightened. Callan stood. Elowen saw Sable's face and reached for her phone. The truck door slammed. A sound came next. metal keys striking against a man's thigh. Sable began to shake. Callan did not need anyone to tell him what that meant. A tall man crossed the yard with a loose, uneven stride, the kind of walk that made every step look like an argument between bones and bad decisions. He was in his mid-40s, narrow through the chest but long-limbed, with a face weathered by cold tobacco and a life spent blaming other things. Dirty blonde gray hair showed beneath a black knit cap pulled low. His cheeks were hollow, his jaw covered by uneven stubble, and broken red veins marked the bridge of his nose. His eyes were pale gray and restless, always calculating distance, exits, and weakness. He wore a cracked gray work jacket, stained denim, old rubber boots, and a heavy ring of keys clipped to his belt. The keys swung with each step. Sable lowered her body until her chest touched the floor. Elowen whispered, "Callan, I know." He moved to the door before the man knocked. He opened it only wide enough to fill the space with his own body. Cold air pushed into the cabin. The man on the porch looked Callan up and down, taking in the old tactical shirt, the square jaw, the military watch, the posture that did not slouch even when relaxed. "You Voss?" he asked. His voice was rough, not deep, with the scraping quality of a shovel dragged over gravel. "What do you need?" Callan asked. The man's eyes shifted past him into the cabin. "My dog." Behind Callan, a sound rose from Sable's chest. It was low, not loud, but the cabin floor seemed to carry it. The man smiled. No warmth reached his eyes. "There she is," he said. "Mira." The name entered the room like a thrown chain. Sable flinched so violently that Pip squeaked beneath her. Callan's hand tightened on the edge of the door. "Her name is Sable," he said. The man's smile widened. "You rename stolen property now?" Elowen stepped into view behind Callan, phone in hand. Her face had changed. The tired sharpness was gone, replaced by something cooler, more dangerous. "Who are you?" "Grady Pike." He said it as though the name should solve matters. "She's mine." Grady reached inside his jacket. Callan's body moved before thought. His shoulders shifted, weight settling, door angle changing. Grady noticed. He froze, then slowly pulled out a folded plastic sleeve instead of anything worse. "Bill of sale," he said. "Microchip number. Bought her 18 months ago from a breeder over in Wallace. Name's Mira. She ran off. She was found bleeding in deep snow with a nursing pup." Elowen said, "Dogs get hurt. Not all the same way." Grady's eyes slid toward her. "You the vet?" "I am." "Then you know animals get dramatic." Elowen stared at him. "Animals don't fake restraint injuries." For the first time, irritation cut through Grady's performance. His jaw shifted under the stubble. "She's a working dog. Working dogs get marks." "What work?" Callan asked. Grady looked back at him. "She knows land, knows old roads, knows how to find her way around. That isn't work. It is when you're paid for it." "Paid by who?" Grady's eyes sharpened. He had almost said too much, and both men knew it. "That's none of your business," he said. Pip made a small sound. Grady's head turned. "The pup too," he said. "That one's mine by rights." Sable rose. It should not have been possible for her to rise that quickly. Pain dragged at her left side, and the bandage pulled beneath the fur, but she placed all 4 feet around Pip and faced the door. Her lips lifted fully now. The growl that came out of her did not sound exhausted. It sounded old. The rehook came in the next breath. Grady did not step back from Callan. He stepped back from Sable. Only half a step, quickly hidden by anger, but Callan saw it. Elowen saw it too. A man claiming ownership had just recognized the animal he supposedly controlled as something he feared. And in that tiny retreat, the whole cabin seemed to understand a hidden truth before any document could say it aloud. Whatever Grady had done to Sable, he had never truly broken her. Pip went silent beneath her, not asleep, silent, as if even that tiny life knew the old monster had found the door. Callan shifted until he blocked Grady's view completely. "You can wait outside," he said. Grady's face reddened. "I'm not waiting anywhere. That's my dog." "She's an injured patient," Elowen said. "Under veterinary care. You do not approach her." Grady lifted the plastic sleeve. "Paper says otherwise." "Paper doesn't treat a hemorrhage," Elowen replied. Callan pulled out his phone and called Sheriff Owen Merrick. Owen arrived 16 minutes later in a brown and white county SUV with snow chained to its tires. He stepped out slowly, not because he was weak, but because he had learned to let people see him arriving before authority arrived with him. Owen Merrick was 51, broad across the shoulders and thick through the middle, with a square face, a neatly trimmed gray-brown mustache, and tired blue eyes beneath the brim of a tan campaign hat. His uniform was clean, pressed, and careful. The care told its own story. Owen believed order mattered because he had seen what happened when order left a room. He had once served in the Marine Corps, though he did not mention it unless someone else did. Men who had served recognized the habit in him anyway. The way he stood with his hands visible, the way his gaze counted people before it judged them, the way grief had made him slower to anger and faster to worry. He had lost a younger deputy 3 winters earlier in a highway rescue during a whiteout. Since then, Owen had become a man who trusted procedures because improvisation had once buried someone he cared about. That made him good at the law. It also made him afraid of moving before the law was ready. He listened first to Grady, then Elowen, then Callan. He looked at the bill of sale, wrote down the chip number, and asked where the dog had been found. He did not smile. He did not dismiss the injuries, but Callan saw the walls of jurisdiction and process rising behind his eyes. "Dr. Hart," Owen said, "you filed the suspected cruelty report. It's drafted, photos taken, measurements recorded. I'll submit it today. County Animal Control will need to review." Grady snorted. "Review all you want after I load her." "No," Owen said. Grady blinked. "No, the animal remains under veterinary care until medically cleared." Elowen's shoulders eased a fraction. Then Owen continued and the fraction disappeared. "But ownership is not resolved by my standing on a porch. If Mr. Pike presses the claim and if the microchip matches, this may become a civil matter unless county issues a seizure order." "A civil matter with stitches and starvation?" Elowen asked. Owen's eyes darkened. "I'm telling you the authority I have today. Then get more. I intend to try." Grady smiled. That smile did more damage than his anger. Callan looked at Sable through the gap behind him. She was standing over Pip, trembling so hard the bandage edge had begun to darken. Her body had already delivered its testimony. It simply spoke in a language too many systems did not accept without translation. Callan looked back at Grady. "How much?" Elowen turned sharply. "Callan." Grady frowned. "What?" "For the dog and the pup. Full transfer. Written. Witnessed." Grady stared at him. Greed arrived slowly, then settled into his face like warmth reaching cold hands. "You serious? How much?" Elowen stepped closer. "This is extortion." "Yes," Callan said. "You pay him, he walks away rewarded." "Yes." "Then why are you doing it?" Callan did not look away from Grady. "Because county procedure has a clock. Sable has a body." Owen said nothing. Grady named a number high enough to be cruel and low enough to be believable. A number that would empty Callan's roof repair account, take the furnace money, and bite deep into the emergency cash he kept behind an old field manual in the bedroom closet. Callan did not bargain. Bargaining would have made the moment about price. This was not price. It was ransom-wearing paperwork. He went inside, leaving Owen on the porch with Grady and Elowen at the threshold. Sable watched him cross the room. Her growl had faded, but she did not sit. Pip remained beneath her, pressed against her chest. Callan opened the bedroom closet. On the top shelf sat a metal lockbox. Inside were envelopes labeled in black marker. Roof, furnace, truck, reserve. He had written the labels with the practical optimism of a man pretending the future could be divided into manageable failures. He took them all. For a moment, he stood in the dim bedroom, money in hand, and saw the roof leak above the kitchen, the furnace coughing through another storm, the truck needing tires. The old life becoming harder because of one choice made for an animal that was not his yesterday. Then he remembered Sable holding Pip in her mouth in the snow. No strength left, no promise of safety, still carrying. Callan closed the lockbox. In the main room, Elowen stood rigid with anger. "You cannot keep buying immediate answers every time the system moves slowly." "I'm not buying an answer." He set the envelopes on the table. "I'm buying time for the right answer to catch up." The transfer was written at Callan's kitchen table. Owen used a standard property transfer form from his vehicle, then added language in careful block letters. Adult female German Shepherd, black and tan, estimated 7 years old. One male puppy, nursing age, pale brown with black forehead marking. All ownership claims released upon payment. No future claim of removal. No approach without written consent. Elowen copied the chip number from Grady's sleeve without letting him hand her the document. She added veterinary notes and injury status. Callan filmed Grady stating aloud that he surrendered all claims to the dog and the puppy. Grady counted the money twice. His fingers were dirty, nails rimmed black, knuckles cracked from cold. He licked one thumb before separating bills, and something about the gesture made Callan want to break the table in half. He did not. Violence would have been simpler. Too simple. It would have fed the wrong god in the room. When Grady finished counting, he tucked the money inside his jacket. "Pleasure doing business," he said. "No," Callan replied. "It wasn't." Grady stood. His keys swung from his belt. Sable's body lowered again. At the door, Grady paused as if remembering something. He walked to his truck, opened the passenger side, and pulled out an old leather lead with a rusted metal clasp. The strap was dark from age and use, cracked in places, stiff with old mud. He tossed it onto the porch. "Comes with her." The metal clasp struck the boards. Inside, Sable recoiled so hard her injured leg folded. She hit the floor with a pained sound, half growl, half breath. Pip cried. Callan moved between the window and the porch before he realized he had moved at all. Grady saw Sable's reaction and smiled. Not triumph, something smaller, something meaner. The pleasure of causing pain that left no bruise he could be charged for. Owen saw it too. For the first time that day, the sheriff's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. His eyes fixed on Grady with the heavy recognition of a man who had just watched the law fail in real time. "Leave," Owen said. Grady shrugged, climbed into his truck, and drove away. The red pickup rattled down the snowy road, keys no longer audible but somehow still ringing in the cabin. No one spoke until the engine faded. Elowen went to Sable first. She checked the stitches, cleaned the fresh bleeding, and murmured low words that were not quite language. Sable allowed it because Pip was crying, and because exhaustion had finally dragged her back down. Owen remained near the table, holding his notebook. Callan picked up the leather lead from the porch with a pair of work gloves. He did not bring it near Sable. He laid it inside a clear plastic storage bag from the kitchen drawer, then added the rusted clasp after photographing it from 3 angles. Elowen looked at him. "You're keeping it?" "Yes." "Good. I wanted to burn it. I know. Would felt better. Proof often doesn't." Owen closed his notebook. "I'll file the incident. I'll attach Dr. Hart's report once it's submitted." Elowen's voice sharpened. And then I request County Animal Control review for cruelty investigation. Request." Owen met her eyes. "That's what I can do today." Callan studied him. The sheriff looked older than he had when he arrived. Snow melted on the brim of his hat. His mustache framed a mouth pressed thin not from indifference but restraint. Callan recognized restraint. He had lived inside it. Sometimes it was discipline. Sometimes it was fear that had learned to stand straight. "You knew him," Callan said. Owen looked at him. "Not well," the sheriff answered after a moment. "Complaints, noise, trespass, a threat someone wouldn't put in writing. Nothing that held. Nothing you could act on." Owen's jaw tightened. "Nothing I did act on." Elowen stopped moving. The honesty sat in the room, uncomfortable and unfinished. Owen put on his hat. "I'll be in touch." He left without asking for coffee. After the sheriff's SUV disappeared, the cabin settled into a poorer silence. Not poor because money had left, though it had. The house seemed to know. The furnace rattled from the hall as if celebrating its reprieve from replacement. A drop of meltwater ticked once from the patched roof into the metal pan Callan had placed beneath the leak that morning. Tick. Sable lay beside Pip, eyes open. Callan sat on the floor several feet away, back against the cabinet. The bagged leather lead rested on the counter like a captured snake. Elowen finished repacking her medical bag. "I'll submit everything tonight. Thank you." "She's legally yours now," Elowen said. Callan looked at Sable. "Legal isn't the same as safe." "No, but it's a wall. Thin one, maybe. Still a wall." Pip squirmed beneath Sable's chin. The mother lowered her muzzle and touched him so gently that Callan felt something in his chest turn painful and quiet. Elowen paused at the door. "Callan." He looked up. She did not react like a dog who ran away from a bad owner. No, she reacted like a witness. Callan's eyes moved to the window, beyond it to the white rise of Silverpine Ridge hidden behind trees. Elowen opened the door. Cold air slipped in. "Don't go up there alone," she said. "I didn't say I was going." "No," she replied. "You just started keeping evidence." Then she left. Callan remained on the floor long after her truck was gone. The day faded toward evening. Outside, snow fell lightly again, softening tire marks, covering the place where Grady had stood, whitening the porch boards where the old lead had struck. Sable slept at last, but not deeply. Pip made little rooting sounds against her chest. Callan looked at the envelopes that were no longer there, the roof that still leaked, the furnace that still rattled, and the 2 animals breathing in the room he had designed for no one but himself. He had bought time, that was all. Not justice, not answers, not safety. Time. But sometimes time was the first mercy. Sometimes it was the narrow bridge between a wounded body and the truth that had not yet learned how to speak. Near the door, his black military watch ticked steadily on his wrist. Callan listened to it. Then he looked at Sable. "You're staying," he said quietly. The mother dog did not open her eyes, but her torn ears shifted toward his voice. And for the first time since the snow road, Callan felt the strange and solemn weight of a promise becoming real. The morning Sable chose the mountain. The cabin was full of thawing light. It came through the front window in pale bars, slipping across the plank floor, touching the metal pan under the roof leak, the stacked towels beside the stove, and the 2 sleeping shapes near the fire. Pip lay curled against his mother's chest, smaller than a winter mitten, his pale golden-brown body rising and falling beneath the edge of a wool blanket. One cream-colored paw stuck out as usual, claiming the world 1 inch at a time. Sable was awake. Callan noticed before she moved. Her black and tan German Shepherd body had begun to recover its shape, though hunger still showed in the hollows behind her ribs. The dark saddle across her back was cleaner now, brushed free of old mud and ice, and the warm brown on her chest had started to return under Elowen's care. Her torn ear tilted slightly, while the other stood sharp and alert. The old leather collar remained around her neck, its worn band a quiet accusation no one in the cabin had forgotten. She was looking at the door, not at the window, not at Pip, the door. Callan stood near the counter with a mug of coffee in his hand. At 33, he still carried himself like the Navy SEAL he had once been. Compact, controlled, lean rather than bulky. His clean-shaven square jaw and gray-blue eyes made harder by years of weather and things left unsaid. His dark brown military-cut hair was still damp from the water he had splashed over his face. He wore his old olive-gray tactical combat shirt with frayed shoulders and cuffs, earth-brown and moss-green combat pants, worn brown military work boots, and the black military watch on his left wrist. The watch ticked steadily. Sable pushed herself up. "Sable," Callan said softly. She paused, but not because of obedience. She was measuring her own pain. Her left hip dipped, and the bandage under her fur pulled at the stitched wound, but she stayed upright. Then she lowered her muzzle, touched Pip once, and limped toward the front door. Callan did not move. 5 days ago, he would have called it panic. 3 days ago, trauma. This morning, it looked like intention. Sable reached the door and turned her head toward him. Her amber-brown eyes held no plea. That unsettled him more than begging would have. Begging could be refused with guilt. This felt older, stranger, as if she were not asking him to save her, but waiting for him to remember what he was. "I told you," he said. "I'm not going up there." Sable stepped closer to the door. Pip squeaked from the blanket nest. Sable looked back immediately. Her body trembled. For a moment, the mother in her pulled hard enough that Callan thought she would return to the stove. Instead, she gave one soft, broken sound, turned again, and pressed her nose to the door seam. Callan set down the coffee. The furnace rattled from the hall, as if offering its opinion on men who spoke bravely, and then reached for their boots. He called Elowen first. Dr. Elowen Hart arrived 20 minutes later with snow still clinging to the tires of her clinic truck. The 41-year-old veterinarian came in wearing her navy parka over teal scrubs, dark waterproof pants, black snow boots, and the expression of a woman who had already guessed the problem before being invited to solve it. Her dark brown hair was tied low, streaked with a few silver strands, and her green-gray eyes went first to Sable, then to Callan, then to the packed field bag beside his chair. "You said you weren't going," she said. "I'm not going alone. That is an improvement so small it may need a microscope. I called you, and yet I still feel underwhelmed by your wisdom." Sable stood by the door, patient in a way that did not belong to a frightened animal. Pip slept again, tucked into warmth. Elowen examined Sable's bandage and checked the stitches. "She can't climb far," Elowen said. "If that wound opens, I'm blaming you in writing." "She doesn't want far," Callan said. "How do you know?" "I don't. That's why I called." Elowen looked at him for a long moment. Her face softened only slightly. "If this is about the old mine, you need Harlan Mott." The name had been mentioned once before, like a key placed on a table but not yet used. "Harlan still lives north of town?" Callan asked. "In a house full of maps and bad opinions." Elowen repacked her bag. "He maintained Silverpine before it closed. If the mountain has a throat, he probably knows where it swallows." Callan glanced at Sable. The dog remained still, waiting. Harlan Mott's house sat 2 miles beyond Clearwater Bend, where the last plowed road narrowed beside a frozen creek. It was a small cedar-sided place with a slanted roof, a sagging porch, and a yard cluttered with stacked firewood, broken survey stakes, 2 rusted wheelbarrows, and an old snowmobile covered by a tarp. The windows glowed yellow despite the bright morning, and smoke drifted from the chimney in a thin, disciplined line. Harlan opened the door before Callan knocked twice. He was 72, lean, slightly stooped, with skin the color of old paper and hands permanently shaped by tools. A rust-orange knit cap covered most of his thin white hair. His white mustache was trimmed short above a mouth that seemed built for disagreement. The last joint of his left ring finger was missing, a souvenir from a conveyor belt accident in the old mine. His eyes were pale blue, sharp and watery at once, and they moved from Callan to Elowen to Sable with a speed that proved age had not dulled suspicion. "No," Harlan said. Callan lowered his hand. "You don't know what I'm asking. You brought a vet, a wounded dog, and that look men get before they ask old fools to remember dangerous things." "So yes, I do." Elowen stepped forward. "Good morning to you too, Harlan. It was better before you brought weather into my doorway." Sable stood beside Callan's left leg, wearing a loose temporary lead that Callan held without tension. She had objected to the lead at first, not by fighting but by sinking low to the floor until Callan set it down and waited. Eowyn had insisted it was necessary outside, so Callan had clipped it to the old collar only after letting Sable smell every inch of the strap. He held it now as if it were a thread of trust, not control. Harlan's eyes stayed on her. "She the one from the mine road?" "Yes," Callan said. The old man's irritation faded, not vanished but thinned. Sable took one step toward him, then stopped. Harlan looked at the torn ear, the bandaged hip, the worn collar, and something in his jaw tightened. "Come in," he said. The inside of Harlan's house smelled of coffee, dust, wood smoke, and old paper. Maps covered the dining table. More maps were pinned to the walls, layered with notes, string, colored pins, and pencil marks that looked like the tracks of a mind unable to stop walking through stone. Shelves held flashlights, folded measuring rods, mason jars full of bolts, old helmets, and notebooks labeled by year. A faded photograph above the stove showed a younger Harlan standing with a crew of miners outside Silverpine, all of them wearing hard hats and expressions that belonged to men who believed the mountain fed them because they had not yet seen how it collected debts. Harlan noticed Callan looking. "Half of them are dead," he said. The other half moved somewhere warmer and pretended they didn't miss the dark. "You miss it?" Callan asked. "No, I miss knowing where things were." He pulled a large linen map from a drawer and spread it across the table, weighing the corners with coffee mugs. Eowyn stood beside him, arms folded. Callan remained near the door with Sable, because she had positioned herself there and he had learned not to drag trust across a room. "This is the public map," Harlan said, tapping the paper. "Tourists, council meetings, liability nonsense. Shows the main drift, 2 sealed adits, storage chamber, old ore track." He pulled another sheet from beneath it. This one was older, stained, and marked with faded red lines. "This is closer to truth." Eowyn leaned in. "Closer?" Harlan snorted. "A mine map is a confession written by men who plan to lie later. Silverpine has 3 layers that matter. First, the old official workings. Second, side cuts and service passages that never made it onto anything polite. Third, water." Callan looked at him. "Water under the mine." "Water through the mountain," Harlan corrected. "Snowmelt, perched pockets, fractures. Silverpine breathes because water moves and air follows. Block the wrong passage, pressure goes where it shouldn't. Drill the wrong seam, and the mountain starts moving things for you." Sable's ears shifted at the word moving, though perhaps it was only Harlan's tone. Callan asked, "Could someone be working up there now?" Harlan's mouth flattened. "Eowyn told me not to ask stupid questions," Callan said. "That was a stupid question," Harlan replied. "Yes." Eowyn looked up sharply. "You know that?" "I know engines have been climbing the North Road at hours honest men reserve for sleep. I know someone cussed the snow gate twice this month. I know the town council pretends not to notice because Silas Creed keeps promising jobs like a preacher promising heaven." Silas Creed had not yet entered Callan's life directly, but his name already seemed to sit in every conversation like a polished stone in muddy water. The man was a developer, investor, donor, and self-appointed savior of Clearwater Bend. His posters in town spoke of renewal, winter tourism, restored trails, and a new future built from the bones of Silverpine. In the grocery store, older women praised his manners. Men behind on mortgages praised his payroll promises. Callan had not met him. That alone made Silas more dangerous in Callan's mind. Men who could move a town without standing in the room deserved watching. Harlan rolled the maps. "If the dog knows a direction, we should follow before daylight leaves." Eowyn raised an eyebrow. "That was easy." "No. Easy was saying no. I already did that. Nobody respected it." They drove in 2 vehicles to the lower Silverpine access road. Callan brought Sable in his truck with blankets packed behind the seat in case she tired. Eowyn followed with Harlan, who complained about her driving until she threatened to make him walk. The road climbed through bright forest. Snow lay smooth on the shoulders, marked by rabbit tracks, falling pine needles, and the long sweeping lines where wind had crossed open patches. The sky remained clear, painfully blue. It was the kind of beautiful day that made danger seem rude for existing. Callan parked below the old gate, not at the mine entrance itself. Sable stood carefully when he opened the door. She sniffed the air and stiffened. Not fear this time. Recognition. Harlan moved slower on the snow than his voice suggested he should. He wore a copper-colored canvas coat over a tobacco-brown sweater, heavy wool pants, old boots, and the rust-orange cap that made him look like a warning flag with opinions. He carried a wooden folding rule, a small shovel, and a headlamp he claimed was better than any modern junk because it had survived more idiots. Elowen carried her medical kit and kept a close eye on Sable's hip. They did not head for the main gate. Sable turned downhill instead, toward a cluster of boulders half buried in snow and fallen branches. Callan followed without tightening the lead. The dog moved slowly, nose low, shoulders tense. Twice she stopped and looked back toward the truck where she knew Pip was not. And each time Callan could see the invisible tether inside her pulling toward the cabin. Pip had been left sleeping in a heated crate under Elowen's assistant's care at the clinic. Sable had resisted leaving him, circling the crate 3 times before finally following Callan out. Even now, every step away from her pup cost her. That cost made the direction matter. She would not leave Pip for nothing. They reached the boulders. At first, Callan saw only snow, dead brush, and rock. Then Sable stopped. Her body sank halfway down, not in submission, but refusal. She stretched her neck forward, sniffed, and backed away with a low whine. Harlan stepped past Callan carefully and held one bare hand above a hollow beneath the brush. Warm air touched his skin, his face changed. "Damn," he said softly. He scraped snow away with the shovel. Beneath it lay a narrow vent opening framed with rotting timber and half-collapsed stone. Ice rimmed the edges, but the center was dark. A faint breath rose from within, carrying the smell of wet rock, old metal, oil, and something mineral-sharp. Elowen moved beside him. "That should be sealed." "It was," Harlan said. "Was." He pointed with the shovel. "That timber's been disturbed. Recently." Callan crouched near the opening, far enough not to crowd Sable. The warm air touched his face. Not natural warmth, not in this temperature. The rehook came when Sable, still trembling several feet away, lowered her nose to the snow and began pawing weakly at a half-buried plank. Not at the vent, beside it. Callan moved to stop her before she strained the wounded hip, but she looked up at him with an intensity that pinned him in place. Her amber eyes were not frightened now. They were focused, insistent, almost sorrowful. He cleared the snow by hand. Under the plank sat a small blue tin, dented and dulled by weather. Harlan went very still. "What is it?" Elowen asked. Callan opened the tin. Inside were stiff food wrappers, a strip of faded purple cloth, 2 rusted safety pins, and a receipt from a grocery that had closed 3 winters ago. The paper had been folded around a small square of dried gauze. Elowen took the gauze and smelled it. "Antiseptic," she said. Callan looked at Sable. The dog had retreated to the edge of the clearing. Her eyes remained on the tin. Someone had not only fed her here, someone had tried to treat her. Harlan removed his cap and rubbed one hand over his thin white hair. "I saw someone up here last fall," he said. His voice had lost all its bite. "Woman in a purple coat, small, moving fast. Thought maybe she was leaving bait for coyotes. I yelled from the road, but she disappeared into the trees." "You didn't report it?" Elowen asked. Harlan gave her a tired look. "Report a woman walking away with a sack in October? To who? Owen, the council?" "They'd have written it down and filed it under Old Man Bothers Weather." Callan studied the receipt. Store didn't print names," Harlan said. "But not many wore purple coats around here." Elowen looked toward the vent. If she fed Sable here, Sable came back more than once. Sable lowered her head. Callan felt the weight of that simple fact. The mother dog had once found a small mercy in this place. Not enough to save her, not enough to free her, but enough to keep returning. Someone had stood near this hole in the mountain and chosen kindness, quietly, fearfully, imperfectly. Kindness, too, could leave evidence. Harlan tucked the tin into a clean cloth from Elowen's kit. "We need June Calder." Elowen sighed. "You hate reporters. I hate lazy reporters. June is irritating, not lazy." Callan looked at him. "Why June?" "Because Silas Creed buys smiles faster than the town sells them. If this turns into anything, people will need ink before they need speeches." June Calder arrived 40 minutes later in a small blue Subaru that had one cracked mirror and a bumper sticker reading "Local news is not dead, just under fun dead." She stepped out with a camera around her neck, a notebook in one hand, and the sharp, cold-bitten determination of a woman who had argued with both weather and creditors before breakfast. June was 36, slender but not fragile, with auburn hair cut just above her shoulders and tucked behind one ear. Thin copper-framed glasses sat on a narrow nose, and her brown eyes were quick enough to make most people regret careless wording. She wore a camel-colored wool coat, a burgundy scarf wound twice around her neck, dark jeans, and brown leather boots already damp from snow. There was elegance in her, but it had been worn thin by work, the kind of elegance that once might have belonged in a city newsroom, before she chose a dying town and a newspaper that barely paid the heating bill. Her paper, the Clearwater Ledger, survived on obituaries, school board minutes, tire ads, and stubbornness. Silas Creed's resort advertisements paid for most of its color printing. That fact arrived with her, though no one said it aloud. June looked at Callan first. You never call me unless something is already on fire. Nothing's burning. She glanced at the vent. The shovel, Sable, the old tin. That is rarely reassuring. Harlan pointed at the opening. Warm airflow through a sealed auxiliary vent. June opened her notebook. How warm? Too warm. That is poetic, Harlan. Useless but poetic, he glared. Right abnormal. June crouched near the tin without touching it. Elowen explained the gauze, the wrappers, Sable's injuries, and the old receipt. Callan said less. He watched June watching Sable. The reporter did not reach for the dog. That earned her a small place in his respect. Sable stood near the edge of the clearing, body angled so she could see the trees, the vent, and Callan all at once. Her torn ear twitched whenever the warm air shifted. June took one photo of the vent, one of the disturbed timber, one of the tin, then lowered the camera. Before anyone says the obvious, I can't print accusations because a dog found a lunchbox. No one asked you to? Callan said. Good, because a wrong story can kill this town as cleanly as a bad project. Harlan snorted. Always comforting. June's expression sharpened. Do you know how many businesses on Main Street are behind? How many families signed preliminary work forms for Creed's project? If I publish smoke and there is no fire, people lose more than confidence. Callan looked at the vent. And if there is fire, then I need proof that doesn't melt in court or public opinion. The words were hard, but not cowardly. Callan heard the difference. June was not protecting Silas. She was afraid of becoming another person who harmed the town while claiming to save it. Elowen pointed towards Sable. She is proof something happened to an animal. Yes, June said, and I can start there. She photographed the worn collar from a distance, the bandage at Sable's hip, the paw prints around the vent. She asked Elowen for copies of the medical report when legally appropriate. She asked Harlan to mark the vent on an old map. She asked Callan exactly where he had found Sable, then stopped when his face closed. Sorry, she said quietly, I need details. Not pain, sometimes they're the same thing, I know. For the first time, June's voice changed, not softer exactly, but older. Callan wondered what story had taught her that. Harlan unfolded the map against a boulder and weighted the corners with stones. Here, he said, tapping with a gloved finger. This vent connects to a lower service line. Shouldn't be pulling warm air unless a passage above it is open or water's moving wrong. Water, June asked. Silverpine has old drainage channels sitting over fractured rock. Drill into the wrong seam, block a side passage, and pressure shifts. If water starts carrying mine metals toward the wrong outlet, Clearwater Lake gets a taste. June stopped writing. Clearwater Lake fed the town reservoir. Even Callan, who kept to the edge of civic life, knew that. Elowen looked down the slope through the trees, toward where the lake lay hidden under winter glare. How fast? Harlan's face tightened. Depends on what fools are doing underground. The ground answered before anyone else could. A heavy sound moved beneath them. Not an explosion, not thunder. A deep internal thud, as though some giant hand had struck stone from the inside. The snow under Callan's boots shivered. Loose powder slid from the boulder. The vent exhaled sharply. Warm vapor burst upward, carrying a fine gray dust that glittered once in the sunlight before settling over the snow. Sable stumbled backward. Callan moved toward her, then stopped before touching. He had learned. She needed space first, help second. The dog's legs shook. Her injured hip nearly gave out. But she did not run. Instead, Sable stepped forward, placing herself between Callan and the vent. Not because he needed protection from a hole in the ground, because her body only knew one holy duty. Stand between danger and the living thing in her care. Callan felt that gesture strike him harder than the tremor. Elowen whispered, Sable. The dog's gaze remained on the vent. June's camera hung forgotten against her chest. Harlan stared at the gray dust on the snow. He bent, touched 2 fingers to it, rubbed them together and smelled them. Fresh rock, he said. Callan looked at the old man. Meaning? Harlan's pale eyes lifted toward Silverpine Ridge. Meaning something shifted where nothing should be shifting. June began writing again, faster now. Elowen checked Sable's bandage. A small line of blood had seeped along the edge, but the wound had not opened fully. She's done, Elowen said. We take her back now. Sable resisted for exactly 1 step, then swayed. Callan crouched beside her, not touching. You showed us. The dog's torn ear moved toward his voice. You showed us enough. Whether she understood the words did not matter. The tone reached her. Or exhaustion did. She allowed Callan to guide her away from the vent, the lead still loose in his hand. Before they left, June took one last photograph, not of the vent, of the snow around it. There were paw prints, boot prints, gray dust, and the old plank where the blue tin had been hidden. A map of fear, kindness, neglect, and warning written in marks that would vanish with the next snowfall. Back at the trucks, Harlan folded the old map with hands that were no longer steady. "I need to check records," he said. "There may be a drainage chamber below the lower cut. If that's connected." He stopped himself. June looked up. "If it's connected, what?" Harlan glanced at Sable, then toward the bright, indifferent mountain. "If it's connected, then the dog didn't just escape a bad man," he said. "She escaped the first crack in something much bigger." No one answered. The wind moved through the pines. Sable leaned against the truck door, too tired to stand straight. Callan lifted her carefully, one arm under her chest, one supporting her hindquarters without touching the wound. She allowed it, though her body stayed tense. Trust, he was learning, was not softness. Sometimes it was simply choosing not to bite the hand that had earned one more chance. As Callan settled her into the blankets, Sable turned her head toward the ridge one final time. Her eyes did not hold panic now, only exhaustion and insistence. The mountain, white and beautiful under the northern sun, gave nothing back. But from the lower vent, far behind them, a thin breath of warm vapor continued rising into the cold. Silverpine was not dead. It was breathing under pressure. By noon, Silverpine Ridge had stopped pretending to be quiet. The tremor from the lower vent had gone through Clearwater Bend like a rumor with boots. It reached the town office first, then the sheriff's desk, then the rescue shed behind the old fire station. By the time Callan Voss returned to the lower access road with Sable resting in the back of his truck, orange cones had been set along the snowbank. A county SUV blocked the old mine gate, and the mountain rescue trailer was being backed into place by a man who looked as if he had been born disappointed in unsafe decisions. That man was Rowan Slate. Rowan was 46, broad-shouldered but not heavy, with a hard, compact build and a square face darkened by years of winter rescues. His hair was iron gray, cut short under a red rescue helmet, and a close-trimmed beard sharpened the line of his jaw. His eyes were brown, calm, and deeply unamused. He wore a dark red rescue shell, black technical pants, a harness loaded with carabiners, and a gas monitor clipped high on his chest. Rowan had once lost 2 volunteers in a flash flood when a poorly mapped culvert collapsed under them. Since then, his mercy had become strict, and his strictness had saved lives. He looked at Callan once and said, "You're Voss." "Yes, Navy." "Was. Good. Then you know how to follow orders." Callan looked toward the mine gate. "Depends who's giving them." Rowan's expression did not change. "Inside that mountain I am." Behind him, Dana Holt unloaded a medical pack from the rescue trailer. Dana was 47, tall, lean, and steady in the way of people who had learned panic was only useful after the patient stopped breathing. Her dark hair was braided tightly and tucked beneath a white helmet marked medic. Her skin was brown, her face narrow and intelligent, and her hands moved with quiet precision over oxygen bottles, thermal blankets, splints, and IV kits. She had served as a flight medic before moving north to care for her father, and she carried the old habit of speaking gently only when things were truly bad. 2 other rescue volunteers worked beside her. Eli Mercer was 29, red-haired, freckled, and wiry, with the eager tension of a younger man trying not to prove himself too loudly. He checked rope coils twice and then checked them again. Mason Reed, 58, thick-necked and slow-moving, had silver hair beneath his helmet and the blunt patience of someone who had spent 30 years repairing logging equipment in weather that hated machinery. A state geotechnical engineer had arrived as well. Her name was Priya Nandakumar, 39, small-framed, with straight black hair tucked into her hood, and a precise face made sharper by rectangular glasses. She wore a yellow hard hat, a dark green insulated jacket, and carried a tablet sealed in a waterproof case. Priya spoke softly, but everyone listened because she used words the way careful people used blades, only where they were needed. Sable stood outside the barrier. She should have been at the cabin. Elowin had said that twice, then given up because Sable had refused to settle unless she could see the ridge. Pip remained safely at the clinic in a heated crate under Elowin's assistant's watch, and that alone had nearly broken Sable's composure. The 7-year-old German shepherd stood with her black and tan body tense beneath a fitted charcoal support harness Elowin had brought from the clinic. The harness avoided the stitched wound at her hip. Her torn ear tilted toward every sound, and her amber-brown eyes never left the mine gate. Callan held the lead loosely. It was not a leash in his mind. It was a promise not to let fear drag her farther than her body could survive. Elowin stood beside them in her navy parka, arms folded, face pale with controlled anger. "She is not going inside." "No," Rowan said, "she isn't." Sable's nose lifted. A breeze came from the dark opening beyond the old gate. Her body sank slightly, then steadied. Callan felt the lead tremble. "She remembers," Elowin said. "Bodies do," Callan replied. Rowan turned toward the group. Listen up. Possible disturbance in lower service line. Unknown unauthorized activity. Possible people inside. Possible unstable timber. Possible water movement. 4 entering first. Me, Dana, Priya, Voss. Eli and Mason stay at the portal with comms and rope. Sheriff keeps the road clear. Nobody improvises. His eyes landed on Callan. Nobody. Callan nodded once. Rowan stepped closer, voice lower. I know your background. I also know what former special operators sometimes do when a room gets small and ugly. What's that? They decide being useful means being first. Callan held his gaze. Rowan said, in there, first is not holy. Alive is holy. We enter as a team or we don't enter. The words were blunt, almost cruel. Callan respected them. They geared up at the portal. Helmet, headlamp, gloves, gas monitor, knee pads, safety line. Harlan Mott stood near the folding command table, his rust-orange knit cap pulled low, the old linen map spread before him under clear plastic. The retired mine technician looked smaller in the open snow, but his pale eyes were sharp with fear disguised as irritation. This map is close, Harlan told Priya. How close? Close enough to get you worried, not close enough to get you proud. Priya looked at Callan. Useful man. When translated, Callan said. Sable watched him clip into the safety line. She pulled forward 1 step. Elowen lowered her hand near the harness but did not grab. Sable. Stay. The dog did not look at Elowen. She looked at Callan, not pleading, remembering. Callan crossed the snow to her before entering. He crouched carefully, staying outside her space until she leaned 1 inch forward. Only then did he lower his hand. Sable sniffed his knuckles, then turned her head toward the mine entrance. I know, he said softly, but not you. Not today. Her torn ears shifted. He stood and followed Rowan into Silverpine. The temperature changed within 20 feet. Outside, winter was bright, sharp, almost clean. Inside, the air grew damp and mineral heavy. Headlamps cut narrow paths through darkness. Old timber supports lined the passage, some blackened by age, some newly reinforced in places that should not have had new wood. Water clicked somewhere along the floor, running in a shallow channel beside rusted rails half buried in mud. The mine smelled of stone, old iron, and something else. Diesel. Rowan noticed it too. Recent machinery. Priya shone her lamp across the wall. And recent drilling. Fresh pale scars marked the rock in a line too straight to be natural. Dana photographed them. Callan crouched beside a boot print pressed into damp grit. The tread was sharp. Recent. They moved deeper. Harlan's voice crackled over the radio from outside. You should pass an old ore pocket on the right, then a braced split. Rowan answered. Ore pocket confirmed. Priya paused at the split. This brace is less than a month old. The timber had been cut clean, the bolts new, the mud around the base disturbed. Beside it lay a torn strip of cheap nylon rope. Callan picked it up with gloved fingers. Dark hair clung to one edge. Dog hair. Elowen's voice came through the radio after Dana relayed the find. Bag it. Dana did. Callan looked ahead into the narrow side passage. It was too small for a man with gear to move through easily, too low in places, too sharp along the broken rock. But a German shepherd could have been forced through. His jaw tightened. Rowan saw it. Keep your head here, Voss, it is. No, your eyes are 3 minutes ahead and 20 feet too angry. Callan released a breath through his nose. They continued. 100 yards in, the official map began to fail. The passage widened where it should have narrowed. A side cut appeared where Harlan's version showed solid rock. Priya marked the location on her tablet. Water moved faster here, a thin black stream sliding along the trench toward the lower tunnel. Then came the first sign that someone was trapped. A voice, faint, human, ragged. Help! Dana stopped instantly. Rowan lifted one fist. Everyone froze. The voice came again from beyond a partial fall of timber and stone at the end of a service crosscut. Rowan moved first, testing footing. Identify yourselves. Silence. Then coughing. A man shouted, 2 inside, 1 hurt. They reached the obstruction. It was not a full collapse, but close. A section of roof had dropped into the crosscut, leaving a jagged low space where sound and air passed, but bodies could not. Beyond it, a headlamp flickered weakly. Rowan knelt. Names. A pause. Brett Lander, the man answered. Tom Vale's hurt. Brett Lander was 38, though when they finally saw his face through the gap, fear made him look younger. He had sandy hair pasted to his forehead with sweat, a narrow face, and a short beard full of dust. His eyes darted from helmet to helmet, calculating what to hide even while begging to be found. Tom Vale, the injured man, was older, around 50, with a heavy jaw, gray stubble, and a thick body gone slack with pain. He lay half-reclined against the wall beyond the fall, one leg trapped beneath a timber brace. His lips had a bluish cast. Dana's medic voice changed. How long has he been pinned? Brett swallowed. Couple hours. Rowan's eyes hardened. Try again. I don't know. Since morning. Priya checked the ceiling near the fall. Unstable. We can't just pull this. Rowan nodded. Dana, assess from here. Voss, camera and light. Priya, roof. Callan fed a small inspection camera through the gap. On the screen, the scene appeared in blue-white fragments. Broken brace, trapped boot, water sliding past Tom's hip, scattered tools, 2 steel sample boxes, a portable drill, and several orange tags marked Creekstone Survey. Priya saw the tags and went still. Creekstone doesn't have authorization inside this section, she said. Brett heard her. We were checking old equipment. Rowan looked at the fresh drill, the sample boxes, the new timber, the trapped man. Lie better, he said. Brett said nothing. Dana passed a thermal blanket and a small oxygen line through the gap. Callan helped guide it with the camera view. Tom groaned when Dana instructed him to move his shoulder. Legs pinned but not crushed, Dana said. Hypothermia starting. We need him out before the water rises. At the word water, Brett's face changed. Callan saw it. What did you open? Callan asked. Brett's eyes flicked away. Rowan leaned closer to the gap. Answer him. We didn't open anything. Water gurgled in the trench behind them louder than before. Priya crouched. Flow rate is increasing. Tom groaned again. Tell them, Brett. Shut up, Brett hissed. Rowan's voice dropped low. If you want both of you out alive, this is the moment you choose truth. Brett looked at the broken roof, then at Tom, then at the black water sliding past his boots. We were sampling, he said. That's all. Creed wanted proof there was a vein still worth something before the resort vote. Grady said the old dog knew the air paths. Said she'd been through here. Callan's hands stilled on the camera cable. Rowan looked at him once. Brett kept talking because fear had broken the lock on his mouth. Grady used her on a line, sent her into narrow cuts. If she came back from one side, he marked it connected. If she froze, he'd pull. I told him it was stupid when she got heavy with pups. Dana's face tightened. Heavy with pups? Brett shut his eyes. From somewhere beyond the collapse, Tom whispered. He kept saying dogs were cheaper than ground radar. For a moment, the mine seemed to lose all sound except water. Callan saw Sable outside in the snow, her torn ear, her worn collar, her body between Pip and danger. He understood then that cruelty had not been random. It had been economical. A living creature had been turned into equipment because men with ledgers had found that suffering cost less than caution. Rowan's voice cut through the dark. We are getting them out. Rage, later. The re-huck came not as a sound, but as a discovery. Priya, checking the wall near the collapsed brace, wiped mud from a small metal plate bolted behind a broken plank. Her lamp caught stamped letters under years of grime. Drainage control, lower reservoir relief. Do not block service channel. She stared at it. Harlan, she said into the radio. Was there a lower reservoir relief channel under this crosscut? Static answered first. Then Harlan's voice came thin and shaken. There was supposed to be. It was abandoned. Priya looked at the water moving around their boots. It isn't abandoned. Callan looked through the gap at the trapped men, the drill, the sample boxes, the rising black stream. The mine had not only been wounded by greed, it had been cut near something that was still holding back the mountain's hidden water, and no one knew how long that old restraint would keep forgiving them. Rowan made the call. Portal command. We have 2 trapped, 1 pinned. Rising water, possible active drainage channel compromise. Request state mine rescue escalation now. We begin controlled extraction. Outside, Eli and Mason began sending in shoring equipment. Inside, time narrowed. They built support in stages. Mason's voice guided rope tension from the portal. Eli fed braces down the line. Dana kept talking to Tom, keeping him conscious with questions about ordinary things. Where he lived, who would be mad if he died, whether he preferred coffee or the dishwater served at Lacey's diner. Coffee, Tom muttered. Wrong, Dana said, but stay alive and we'll argue. Callan worked beside Rowan, passing braces, setting anchors, holding light where Priya needed to measure cracks. It was close work, slow work, the kind that punished impatience. Every board had to be placed before weight shifted. Every rock had to be understood before it was touched. Water kept rising. It reached Tom's hip, then his lower ribs. Dana's voice stayed calm, but her hands moved faster. Callan saw a side panel of old timber partly blocking a lower channel beyond the gap. Water piled against it, swirling back toward Tom. If the panel came loose, pressure might drop. He could see the angle. He could reach it with the pry bar after they widened the gap. It looked like the answer. The kind of answer a man could act on before fear stole another life. Panel on the lower right, Callan said. If we open it, flow may divert. Priya looked sharply. May, water's rising. I need to know where it diverts. Tom coughed, water lapping at his jacket. Callan's pulse changed. He saw another room, another weight, another clock eating breath. Voss. Callan reached for the pry bar. Voss, I can relieve the pressure. Hold. Tom made a choking sound. Callan moved. He set the pry bar against the panel and forced. The wood cracked faster than expected. For one heartbeat, the water dropped. Then the channel beyond answered like a beast awakened. A surge of black water shot through the gap, not away from them but across the extraction route, slamming into Eli's rope line and knocking a loose brace sideways. Dana stumbled. Eli, just inside the supported section now, lost footing and slid toward the trench. Callan grabbed his harness with both hands. The force nearly pulled both of them down. Rowan drove one shoulder into Callan's back and anchored them against the wall. Priya dropped to her knees and caught the loose brace before it twisted into the shoring. "Back!" Rowan shouted. "Reset! Reset now!" Dana clipped Eli's secondary line to a higher anchor. Eli gasped, eyes wide, water streaming off his rescue shell. Callan held him until Mason's rope tension pulled him clear. No one spoke for 3 seconds. Then Rowan seized Callan by the front of his harness and shoved him against the wall hard enough to rattle his helmet. "You do not fix this alone," Rowan said. Callan's breath came hard. You saw one piece. The water, you saw one piece." The words struck deeper than the shove. Callan looked at Eli, pale and shaking but alive. He looked at Dana, already checking the line. He looked at Priya, mud on her face, eyes furious but focused. Then he looked through the gap at Tom, still trapped because his fast answer had made the route worse. He had waited too long once. Now he had moved too soon. Different sins, same altar. Fear. Rowan released him. "Are you here?" Callan swallowed. "I'm here." "Then be useful." After that, Callan obeyed, not blindly, not passively. Fully, he became hands in a system instead of a man trying to become the system. He held braces while Priya set safer angles. He relayed Dana's instructions without shortening them. He moved only when Rowan gave the sequence. He used strength where strength belonged and kept it holstered where it did not. The rescue slowed, and because it slowed correctly, it worked. They widened the gap enough for Dana to reach Tom's leg. She assessed the pin, started warming measures, and applied a temporary splint once Rowan and Callan lifted the timber with controlled leverage. Tom screamed once, then apologized for it, which made Dana call him an idiot in the most comforting tone Callan had ever heard. Brett came out first, shaking, face gray with guilt and cold. Tom came next, strapped into a narrow rescue sled, oxygen mask fogging, one gloved hand gripping Dana's sleeve until she told him he could either breathe or flirt with death, but not both. The journey out took nearly an hour. Water cut across the floor in places where it had not before. Twice they had to reroute around unstable timber. The mine seemed to complain around them, clicking, dripping, shifting in small sounds that made every helmet tilt upward. When daylight finally appeared ahead, it looked impossibly large. Outside, the rescue area had grown. Sheriff Owen Merrick stood near the command table, face grim beneath his campaign hat. Harlan argued with a radio operator over map markings. Elowen waited behind the barrier with Sable. The moment Callan emerged, Sable stood. She did not bark. She did not pull. Her amber eyes fixed on him with a steadiness that made the world narrow. Callan helped transfer Tom to the waiting ambulance. Brett sat wrapped in a blanket under Owen's watch, staring at the snow like a man trying to find a place to put shame. Only after Dana gave Callan a short nod did he cross to Sable. He stopped a few feet away. She took one step. Her injured hip trembled. Her torn ear tilted. Her black saddle was dusted with snow, and her warm brown chest rose with careful breaths. Then Sable pressed the side of her head into his palm. Not a collapse, not a surrender, a choice. Callan closed his hand gently around the air near her cheek, not holding, only receiving. Behind them, Rowan's voice carried across the snow, issuing orders for a second team, groundwater containment, state review, and full closure of the lower access. Priya spoke into a satellite phone. Harlan stared at the ridge as if an old enemy had finally admitted it was still alive. Callan looked down at Sable. "You were right," he said. Sable's eyes closed for one breath, then opened toward the mountain. The rescue had pulled 2 men out of Old Silver, but the water was still moving. And Silverpine had only begun to tell them what men had done in the dark. By morning, Clearwater Bend had divided itself before anyone called a meeting. The first version of the story said 2 men had been rescued from Silverpine after wandering into an old service tunnel like fools. The second said there had been illegal drilling. The third said a dog had somehow led people to a hidden danger beneath the mountain. By noon, the story had become whatever each person most feared. At Lacey's diner, men in insulated coats argued over black coffee and eggs gone cold. At the gas station, a mechanic told 3 customers that shutting down Silas Creed's project would kill the town before the mine water ever could. At the church pantry, Two elderly women whispered that any future built over cruelty would come due with interest. Clearwater Bend was not a large town. It did not need a newspaper to spread fear. It only needed a counter, a coffee pot, and someone saying, "I heard." Callan Voss heard none of it at first. He sat on the floor of his cabin near the stove, one shoulder against the lower cabinet, watching Sable sleep beside Pip. The 7-year-old German shepherd mother lay curled around her puppy, her black saddle rising and falling with slow breaths. Her warm brown chest had more strength now, though her left hip still looked too fragile beneath the bandage. The old leather collar had been replaced with a softer temporary one from Elowen, but the worn mark around Sable's neck remained, a pale ring where freedom had not yet grown fur back. Pip had become a small tyrant of blankets. The puppy, golden brown with the black smudge on his forehead and the one cream paw, kept crawling toward the edge of the nest as if destiny lay 3 inches beyond the towel. Every time he escaped, Sable woke, nudged him back, and gave Callan a look that seemed to accuse him of poor border security. "You chose motherhood," Callan said quietly. "I was drafted," Pip squeaked. Sable opened one amber eye. "I'm hearing complaints from management," Callan said. The dog closed her eye again. It should have made him smile. It almost did. Then his phone vibrated on the table. "June called her," Callan answered. "Yes, you need to come to town." June's voice was clipped, controlled, but tight underneath. The 36-year-old reporter never wasted panic on the first sentence. That made the second one more important. "I have documents," she said, "and someone you need to meet." Callan looked at Sable. "About Silverpine? About the dog? About Grady? About Silas? About all of it?" He stood slowly. Sable lifted her head before he moved toward the door. "I can't bring her," Callan said. "I didn't ask you to." Sable was already trying to stand. Callan covered the phone. "No," Sable's torn ear tilted. "No," he repeated, softer. She looked past him toward the window, toward the invisible ridge. Pip squeaked beneath her chin. That sound settled the argument. Sable lowered herself again, though her eyes remained on Callan with a weight that felt almost human. "I'll come," Callan told June. He called Elowen before leaving. Dr. Elowen Hart arrived 15 minutes later, hair tied low, navy parka unzipped over teal scrubs, a veterinary bag in one hand and a look of suspicion on her face. She was 41, sharp-eyed, practical, and possessed of the kind of compassion that wore boots and carried antibiotics. She checked Sable's bandage, inspected Pip, and then looked at Callan. "You're going into town?" "Yes." "Good. Ask questions. Do not punch answers. I've rarely found punching informative. That is not what your history suggests." He took his jacket from the hook. Elowen's expression softened a fraction. "I'll stay until you get back." Callan looked at Sable. The dog watched him without moving. That was worse than if she had pulled against him. Trust, he had learned, sometimes looked like letting someone leave and expecting them to return. "I won't be long," he said. He was not sure whether he said it to Sable or himself. June had turned the office of the Clearwater Ledger into a war room made of paper. The building sat on Main Street between a closed pharmacy and a bakery that survived mostly through stubborn cinnamon rolls. Its front windows were fogged from bad insulation. A faded sign above the door read Clearwater Ledger in peeling gold letters. Under it, someone had taped a new sheet of paper that said "Local News Still Bites." Inside, the office smelled of printer toner, old wood, weak coffee, and financial desperation. Stacks of newspapers leaned against one wall. A space heater hummed under a desk with 3 unpaid invoices clipped to a board above it. June Calder stood over a table covered with maps, printouts, photographs, and handwritten notes. She wore her camel-colored wool coat over a dark sweater, burgundy scarf loose around her neck, copper-framed glasses sliding down her nose. Her auburn hair was tucked behind one ear, and her brown eyes looked sharper than usual, as if she had slept badly and decided fatigue could wait its turn. Beside her sat a woman Callan had never seen before. She was in her late 50s, perhaps 59, small-framed and narrow-shouldered, with pale skin weathered by years of cold and worry. Her gray hair was pinned carefully at the back of her head, though several strands had escaped around her face. She wore a faded plum winter coat, black gloves folded in her lap, and old brown shoes polished with the anxious care of someone who had owned little but tried to keep it decent. Her eyes were hazel, red at the rims, and she held a square metal case against her knees with both hands. June nodded toward her. "Callan Voss, this is Lydia Vane." Lydia stood halfway, then seemed unsure whether standing was too formal or sitting was too rude. "Mr. Voss, Callan." Her eyes went to his face, then to the old tactical shirt beneath his jacket, the military watch, the boots still damp from cabin snow. She looked away quickly, not out of disrespect, but because some people who had been frightened too long avoided directness the way others avoided fire. You fed Sable, Callan said. The name struck her. Lydia's fingers tightened around the metal case. Is that what you call her? Yes, a small breath escaped her. Not quite a sob, not quite relief. I called her Mercy, Lydia said, not to her face. I didn't dare make her come to a name. But in my head, she was Mercy. June stopped writing. Callan stayed still. Lydia looked down at her gloves. Because she kept coming back when nothing around that place deserved mercy. The room seemed to grow quieter. June pulled out a chair for Callan. She came from Casper this morning. I found her through the receipt in the tin, an old pharmacy account, and a disconnected phone number that apparently belonged to her sister. My sister May, Lydia said. She has lung disease. I take care of her now. Her voice had the soft, careful rhythm of someone used to keeping peace in rooms where peace was fragile. Callan sat. Lydia opened the metal case. Inside were photographs, folded papers, printed emails, 2 small notebooks, and a purple strip of fabric sealed in a plastic bag. The fabric matched the strip from the tin near the vent. Lydia touched the bag with one finger. That came from my coat. It tore on a nail near the lower vent. June placed one photograph in front of Callan. It showed Sable months earlier, thinner than she should have been even then, tied to a line near a cluster of rocks. Her black and tan coat was muddy. A metal clip ran from her collar to a long cable. In the background stood Grady Pike, half turned away, keys at his belt. Callan felt his hand close slowly. Another photograph showed tire tracks near the North Access Road at night. Another showed stacks of sample boxes. Another showed a dog bowl hidden beneath brush. I worked part-time at Vic's General before it closed, Lydia said. Grady came in for cheap meat scraps, not often enough. I saw the dog in his truck one day. She was pregnant then. I told him she needed a vet. What did he say? Lydia's mouth trembled. Pregnancy isn't an injury. June looked down at the table. Callan did not speak. Lydia continued because stopping might have made returning impossible. I followed him once. I know that was foolish. I saw him send her toward one of the small openings with a line clipped to her collar. If she hesitated, he pulled. If she came back from a direction, he marked something in a notebook. Why didn't you report it? Callan asked. The question was not gentle. Lydia accepted it. I tried. Her voice thinned. I called Sheriff Merrick's office about trespass, dogs at the old mine, noise at night. I didn't have photographs then, just what I saw. A week later, Grady came to my porch after dark. He hit the railing with a tire iron and told me old houses burn fast in winter. June's pen stopped. I filed that too, Lydia said. Owen wrote it down. He asked if Grady had entered the house. He hadn't. Asked if anyone witnessed it. No. Asked if he directly said he would burn it. He said old houses burn fast. Enough to scare you, Callan said. Yes. Lydia looked at him directly for the first time. Fear explains a thing. It does not improve it. The words landed in him hard. Not because she accused herself, because he knew the shape of that sentence. June spread out the emails. These came from a laptop Lydia was given by a man named Paul Sutter, one of the night drivers. He left town after Creekstone stopped paying him. He thought he had deleted everything. But Lydia's nephew recovered some files. Callan scanned the printed messages. Names appeared: Grady Pike, Creekstone Survey, Silverpine Preliminary Access, Creed, Silas Creed, not orders written like villainy, not hurt the dog or break the law. The language was clean, careful, businesslike. Words like off-record assessment, unofficial verification, legacy passages, airflow confirmation, avoid public access dates. The clean language made it worse. Men could bury cruelty under tidy phrases and call it operational planning. June pointed to one email. This says, the canine method remains cheaper than expanded ground radar pending site approval. Lydia closed her eyes. Callan looked toward the window. Outside, Main Street moved under the weight of ordinary life. A woman crossed with a paper bag from the bakery. A truck idled near the hardware store. 2 men shoveled snow from a roofline. People trying to survive Wednesday, not knowing Wednesday had already chosen them. Silas knew, Callan said. June did not answer quickly. The emails indicate someone using his initials knew enough to ask for results. I need confirmation before printing his name. That sounds cautious. It is. Good. She looked surprised. Callan looked back at the papers. Caution isn't cowardice if it keeps the truth alive. June's expression shifted just slightly. That may be the nicest thing anyone has said about my delay. Don't frame it. Before she could answer, the office door opened. Sheriff Owen Merrick stepped inside. He removed his tan campaign hat as soon as he saw Lydia. Owen was 51, broad-shouldered and thick through the middle, with a square face, a trimmed gray-brown mustache, and tired blue eyes that had spent too many years measuring what could be proven against what was plainly true. His uniform was clean, his boots polished, his posture still carrying the echo of the Marine he had been. He looked at Lydia and aged several years in one breath. "Mrs. Vane," he said. "Sheriff." No one spoke. Owen looked at the documents on the table. "June called me." "I did," June said. "Because if I publish without giving you a chance to respond, you'll say I ambushed you. If I wait, people will say I helped bury it. I'm trying not to be useless in both directions." Owen nodded once. "Fair." Callan watched him. Lydia folded her hands. "I did report it." Owen closed his eyes briefly. "You did? You said there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough for what I wanted to do. And for what you could have done?" The question was soft. It struck harder than shouting. Owen looked at the floor. "More than I did." The rehook came in the form of a confession no one had dragged out of him. Owen reached into his coat pocket and placed a thin folder on the table. Inside were copies of old complaint slips: night drilling, dogs barking near Silverpine, a threat at Lydia's house, Grady trespassing on closed access roads, a missing shepherd mix from a neighboring ranch, tire tracks after midnight. Each report alone was small. Together they formed a map. Owen's voice was low. "I treated them as separate incidents. Because separate incidents don't shut down a project. Separate incidents don't put half the town at my door asking why I killed their jobs. Separate incidents let a man sleep if he doesn't line them up." June stared at the folder. Lydia's face crumpled, not in victory but exhaustion. Owen continued. "I wasn't paid. I wasn't threatened. I wasn't ordered. I was afraid the next report would be the one with proof. And until then I told myself waiting was responsible." Callan felt the words move through him like cold water. Waiting was responsible. He had said that to himself once, in another place, with men behind him and voices trapped ahead. Owen looked at Callan. "Sometimes law becomes a shelter for fear," no one replied. Then June picked up her pen. "May I quote you?" Owen gave a tired laugh without humor. "I suppose I've earned that." By evening, the town meeting had been moved to the old railway freight house because the council room was too small and the church hall was too political. Snow began before sunset, soft at first, then thicker, gathering on the abandoned rails behind the building. Volunteers set folding chairs beneath blackened beams. Portable heaters glowed red along the walls, losing their war against the cold each time the doors opened. Clearwater Bend came in boots, wool hats, work jackets, church coats, and fear. Shop owners sat near miners' widows. Young fathers who had applied for construction jobs stood with arms crossed. Retired men leaned on canes. Mothers held folders of bills. Silas Creed's supporters came early and sat together, polished and grim. People who wanted the mine closed stood near the back, as if expecting to need the exit. Callan arrived with Elowin. Sable was not with him. She remained at the cabin with Pip under Elowin's assistant's watch. That had been the right decision, but the absence felt like a missing witness. Her body had carried the truth farther than anyone else, and now humans would stand in a heated room arguing over whether truth was affordable. At the front, June arranged her notes beside a projector borrowed from the high school. She looked paler than usual but steady. Her newspaper might not survive this. Silas could pull advertisements. Businesses could blame her for scaring investors. A story could be true and still cost more than the teller owned. Harlan Mott sat near the aisle with his rust-orange cap in his hands and 3 rolled maps beside his boots. The old mine technician muttered to himself about public ignorance with folding chairs. Rowan Slate stood against the wall, red rescue jacket zipped, arms crossed. Dana Holt sat nearby with a medical report from the rescue. Sheriff Owen Merrick stood at the side, hat in hand instead of on his head. Then Silas Creed entered. The room changed before he spoke. Silas was 52, tall, composed, and dressed with the quiet wealth of a man who never looked overdressed because he had made polish part of his personality. His hair was brown with silver at the temples, combed neatly back. His face was handsome in a controlled way, with a straight nose, smooth jaw, and a smile calibrated to reassure donors, widows, and bank managers. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a gray cashmere sweater, dark trousers, clean leather boots, and black gloves he removed finger by finger. His eyes were blue, bright, and watchful. He greeted people by name. That was part of his power. He knew whose son needed a job, whose roof had collapsed, whose daughter wanted to leave town, whose store was behind on rent. He carried hope the way some men carried knives, hidden until close. June began with facts, not accusations. Facts: unauthorized disturbance near the lower vent, evidence of recent drilling, rescue team findings, veterinary documentation of Sable's injuries, photographs of the dog tied near the access point, Lydia's testimony, complaint slips previously filed, emails referencing off-record airflow checks and canine method, groundwater risk described by Priya and confirmed by Harlan's maps. Elowin spoke next. She did not ask the town to pity Sable. She described restraint injuries, malnutrition, untreated wounds, pregnancy, and stress responses. Her voice remained steady. A dog is not a legal document, she said, but a body keeps records. This one kept records and scars. Harlan explained the mountain. He used no poetry, only layers, water pressure, blocked channels, old drainage, metals in the reservoir. The room grew quieter when he showed the map of how Silverpine's lower lines angled toward the watershed feeding Clearwater Lake. Rowan described the rescue. Inside a mine, he said, a map is a promise. When unauthorized work changes the ground, that promise breaks. We got 2 men out. Next time we may recover bodies instead. Lydia stood last among the witnesses. Her plum coat looked too thin under the freight house lights. Her hands shook, but her voice did not vanish. She admitted she had been afraid. She admitted she had fed Sable but not saved her. She told them about Grady's threat, about the dog on the line, about telling herself someone braver would handle it. I was not brave, she said, but fear did not make the dog less hungry. No one moved. Then Silas rose. He did not look angry. That made him more dangerous. Anger would have made him small. He looked wounded on behalf of the town. I hear the concern, he said. I truly do. But I also hear a community on the edge of losing its only real chance at renewal. Silverpine has sat dead for decades. We are offering jobs, tourism, tax revenue, winter stability. If mistakes were made by contractors, they should be investigated. But we must not confuse isolated misconduct with the entire future of Clearwater Bend. Murmurs rose. He turned slightly, meeting faces. How many of you applied for work? How many businesses ordered supplies? How many families planned around this project? Shutting everything down may feel righteous tonight. But righteousness does not pay mortgages. The words found their targets. Callan saw shoulders tighten around the room. Hope was a hard thing to argue against, especially when it wore clean boots and spoke in complete sentences. June stood again. Her hands were steady now. One more document, she said. She projected an email chain onto the wall. Cost estimates. Water treatment liabilities. A recommendation to postpone full remediation until after approval. A line suggesting that long-term drainage maintenance could be transferred to a local improvement district once the access easement was secured. Rachel Fenwick, a county environmental attorney in her mid-50s with silver-streaked black curls and a dark green blazer beneath her winter coat, rose from the second row. She had arrived quietly at June's request, carrying a leather case and the patient severity of someone paid to disappoint powerful people with accurate language. This means, Rachel said, that some future costs could have been shifted to the town after approval. The room erupted. Silas's smile thinned. That is an interpretation. Rachel adjusted her glasses. It is a generous one. The meeting nearly broke apart. People shouted about jobs, lies, water, taxes, dogs, outsiders, survival. Owen stepped forward once, not to command, but to steady the room. His face looked stripped. I failed to connect complaints that should have been connected, he said. I will submit those reports for county review. I cannot undo that failure tonight. A woman in the third row called out. Did they pay you? Owen looked at her. No. Then you failed us for free? Silence fell. Owen lowered his eyes. Yes. Callan stood because someone called his name, though he did not know who. The room turned toward him. He did not want to speak. Men like Silas loved rooms like this because words could be arranged like furniture, hiding weak floors. Callan had spent years trusting action more than speech, but Sable was not there. Pip was not there. The ones who had carried the first truth could not stand before folding chairs and explain what it cost. So he walked to the front. He did not use notes. Years ago, he said, I waited outside a damaged building because I wanted more certainty before sending my team inside. The room quieted differently. He did not describe the dead. Some memories deserved not to be spent for persuasion. We waited. The safe answer never arrived. By the time we moved, time had made part of the decision for us. He looked toward Rowan and Dana. Last week, inside Silverpine, I made the opposite mistake. I moved too fast because I was afraid of waiting again. I opened a channel before the team had the whole picture, and I nearly hurt a man trying to help. Rowan gave one small nod. Callan turned back to the room. Waiting can be wisdom. It can also be fear wearing a clean coat. Acting fast can be courage. It can also be guilt trying to buy its way out. I can't tell this town what loss it can afford. I don't own a store here. I don't have a job offer depending on Silverpine. But I know this. If the smallest, weakest living thing is the one paying for our silence, then we are not building a future. We are burying the bill. No one applauded. That was good. Applause would have made it too easy. The vote came after another hour of argument. Not on shutting down everything forever. Rachel made sure of that. The measures were specific. Suspend Silas Creed's current mine access pending independent investigation. Request state environmental review of the lower drainage system. Preserve all records and physical evidence. Establish a Clearwater Water Protection Fund overseen by a temporary citizen board. Paper ballots were passed. The counting took 19 minutes. Outside, snow thickened over the abandoned rails. Inside, people waited with the faces of those who knew every outcome would hurt someone. The measures passed by 9 votes. Some people exhaled like they had been holding breath for years. Others sat very still. A man in a work jacket folded his preliminary employment letter and put it back into his pocket as carefully as if it were a flag from a funeral. A bakery owner wiped her eyes without making a sound. Silas Creed buttoned coat slowly, face composed again, already becoming the kind of man who would survive one room and prepare for the next. June lowered her pen. Lydia sat with both hands over her mouth. Owen remained standing at the wall, hat held against his chest. Callan left before the room decided what to do with its grief. Outside, the night was white and cold. Snow gathered on his shoulders. The freight house windows glowed behind him, full of people who had not been saved, only made responsible. His phone vibrated. A text from Elowen. Sable is awake. Pip is yelling at the blanket. Both stable. Callan read it twice. Then he looked toward the dark line of Silverpine Ridge beyond town. Truth had come. Not like an angel, like a bill left unpaid through too many winters. And now Clearwater Bend had chosen to open it. Grady Pike was arrested 3 days after the town vote. Not in a dramatic raid. Not while fleeing through pine trees. Not with a shovel in his hand and guilt written across the sky. He was arrested outside the old freight house, beside the same rusted red pickup that had carried him to Callan Voss's cabin. That made it worse somehow. Evil rarely arrived wearing a black cloak. Sometimes it leaned against a cracked windshield, chewed tobacco, and blamed a wounded dog for ruining a paycheck. Sheriff Owen Merrick stood beside 2 county deputies while snow drifted across Main Street in loose white veils. Owen looked older than he had a week before. His tan campaign hat sat low over his brow, and the gray-brown mustache above his mouth seemed heavier, as though every word spoken at the town meeting had settled there. He was still broad-shouldered, still careful in his pressed uniform, still a man built around rules. But now the rules no longer protected him from the truth. Grady laughed when Owen read the warrant. Animal cruelty, witness intimidation, criminal trespass, participation in unauthorized excavation at a restricted mine site. Grady's pale gray eyes slid past the sheriff and found Callan. Callan stood near Elowen's clinic truck, one hand resting loosely near Sable's lead. He had not brought her to watch a man suffer. He had brought her because the county investigator wanted to confirm her response to Grady's voice and keys as part of the cruelty report, and because leaving her behind had become its own kind of torment. Pip lay inside Elowen's heated van in a padded crate, making small offended sounds at the blanket that had dared fold around him. Sable stood beside Callan, thin but no longer broken-looking. Her black and tan coat had begun to regain its sheen. The dark saddle on her back was clean, the warm brown on her chest richer now, though the fur around her left hip still grew unevenly over the healing wound. Her torn ear tilted in the wind, her amber-brown eyes fixed on Grady with a stillness that felt more dangerous than barking. At Grady's belt, the keys rattled. Sable's body tightened. Callan felt it through the loose line, a tremor traveling from her shoulders to the worn places where fear still lived beneath recovery. Grady saw it and smiled. There still knows me. Owen's jaw hardened. Turn around. Grady ignored him, looking straight at Sable. That animal ruined everything. Sable lowered her head. The old answer rose in her body. Teeth. Lunge. Survive. End the thing before it reached Pip. From inside the van, Pip squeaked. Grady's head snapped toward the sound. There's the pup, he said. Sable surged one step forward. Callan did not yank her back. He only said her name, Sable. The dog shook so violently that the support harness shifted across her chest. Her eyes stayed locked on Grady. The keys swung once more, metal striking metal in the cold morning. Sable, Callan said again, quieter. For a moment, nothing moved except the snow. Then Sable turned her head, not fully, not easily, but enough. Her amber eyes found Callan's face. Callan did not praise her, not yet. Praise could feel like command in the wrong moment. He only stood between her and the old world, steady as a door that would not open. Owen stepped forward. When Grady tried to twist away from the deputy's hand, Owen caught his wrist and locked it behind his back with practiced efficiency. The handcuffs clicked. Grady spat toward the snow. You people choose a dog over jobs? No, Owen said. We chose evidence over excuses. The deputies walked Grady toward the patrol SUV. He shouted Sable's old name once, the one he had used before, the one that had once made her fold to the floor. This time, Sable did not follow the sound. She turned toward Elowin's van. Elowin opened the side door just enough for Pip's little nose to poke out between blanket folds. The puppy, golden brown with the black mark on his forehead and one cream paw, sniffed the cold air and squeaked at the world as though filing an official complaint. Sable lowered her muzzle. Mother and pup touched noses. Grady disappeared into the patrol car behind her. She did not watch him go. Callan looked down at her and felt something loosen in his chest that he had not known was clenched. The past had called. For the first time, Sable had chosen not to answer. The investigation did not end with Grady. It climbed upward, as hidden things often did when the first stone came loose. Silas Creed did not go to jail that week. Men like Silas rarely fell as quickly as men like Grady. He had attorneys, careful emails, polite denials, and enough distance between his clean gloves and the dirty work to slow the hand of consequence. But his project no longer moved with the smooth arrogance of money expecting open gates. State officials suspended the Silverpine access permits. Creekstone Survey withdrew its local crew. County environmental investigators fenced off the lower vent, marked the unauthorized cuts, and ordered independent groundwater testing. Priya Nandakumar returned with a state team, her precise voice recorded in meeting minutes now rather than echoing off wet stone. Harlan Mott spent 2 full afternoons arguing with younger engineers over map errors, until one of them finally admitted he was right, at which point he seemed disappointed there had been no fight left. The original resort plan died quietly. There was no funeral. Only emails, revised proposals, and men in expensive coats using words like adjustment, phase development, and community partnership where ordinary people might have said, "We got caught." The new plan moved the lodging complex down to a lower bench of land, beyond the most unstable workings. It reduced cabins, delayed the ski road, and required Creekstone's parent company to contribute to a groundwater treatment system and stabilization work around the old drainage lines. No drilling could resume without independent review. No access road could cross town land until the Clearwater Water Protection Fund approved monitoring requirements. It was not victory, not the kind stories like to polish. Clearwater Bend paid for the truth. 2 contracts vanished before spring. The hardware store reduced hours again. A family with a blue pickup moved to Boise after the father's promised Silverpine job disappeared. Lacey's Diner stopped serving dinner on weeknights. People who had voted for the investigation still stared too long at empty storefronts, as if wondering whether honesty was another luxury the town could barely afford. June Calder wrote that sentence in the Clearwater ledger and then crossed it out. She had learned that truth did not need to be made crueler to be honest. June's office remained cold. The newspaper survived by a margin so narrow it felt like walking along a roof beam in a blizzard. Silas pulled his advertising. 3 local businesses pulled theirs too. 1 publicly, 2 with embarrassed phone calls that ended in apologies. June accepted but did not print. Then something strange happened. Subscriptions rose. Small checks arrived from people who said they had forgotten local news could still matter. Someone taped $20 to the office door with a note that read, "Keep biting." June framed the note in cheap glass. Owen Merrick submitted himself for county review. He did not resign immediately. That would have looked too clean. Too much like an exit disguised as honor. Instead, he stayed through the first part of the investigation, turned over complaint logs, answered questions, and stood in rooms where people no longer looked at him the way they used to. When the review concluded that he had failed to connect credible complaints and delayed escalation, he stepped down. His resignation letter was plain, no noble language, no speech about service, just poor judgment, inadequate follow-through, and a pattern of treating intimidation as isolated inconvenience. For 2 weeks afterward, people saw Owen only at the grocery store or clearing snow from his own walkway. Then Rowan Slate accepted him into the Mine Rescue Auxiliary, not as a leader, not as a badge, as a volunteer who cleaned gear, checked batteries, labeled rope bags, and recorded inspection dates. The first time Callan saw Owen at the rescue shed, the former sheriff was scrubbing mud from a coil of rope. No campaign hat, no polished authority. Just a man doing the kind of work that did not forgive him, but also did not turn him away. Callan understood that more than he wanted to. In late March, the Silverpine assay station reopened under a new purpose. The old building sat below the ridge, built of dark timber and stone, with a roof repaired by volunteers and a new steel-reinforced door facing the road. Once, men had brought ore there to be measured, weighed, and judged. Now the eastern workroom held water monitors, acidity gauges, pressure charts, and a radio linked to the county emergency channel. The storage room became an archive for mine maps, complaint records, old mineral agreements, and photographs that June insisted should not disappear into private drawers again. The front room became a winter shelter. Blankets, emergency heater, first aid cabinet, a hand crank radio, a bench beside the stove, a sign by the door telling stranded drivers to come in, warm up, and leave their pride outside, because Frostbite did not respect independence. Callan was offered a 1-year contract as Silverpine safety coordinator. He refused before the town clerk finished explaining the pay. The clerk, a narrow man with spectacles and a nervous cough, blinked at him across the table. "You haven't read the second page. I heard enough. It includes mileage. I'm not a mule. It includes authority to close the access road in weather events. I don't want authority." The clerk seemed to find that almost offensive. Callan left the unsigned contract on the table. That night, Elwyn found it under a mug in his cabin. By then, the cabin no longer looked like a place designed to keep the world out. A soft dog bed sat near the stove. Pip had a crate, though he treated it less like a bed and more like a fortress from which to launch attacks against socks. A basket of towels stood beside the door. 2 bowls rested where Callan had once kept a stack of woodworking magazines. Sable lay near the fire, her body healthier now, though still lean. Her coat shone black and brown in the firelight. The healing scar at her hip drew a faint line under the fur whenever she shifted. She watched Pip wrestle one of Callan's gloves with the solemn patience of a queen observing a drunk knight. Elwyn picked up the contract. "You forgot to sign." "I did not forget." "Then your handwriting has become remarkably passive." Callan took the papers from her and set them back down. Elwyn removed her gloves. She looked tired, but warmer than she had in the first days, as if watching Sable heal had returned something to her too. "Why not? The last place I managed became a place I never left." "You mean the cabin?" "I mean every door I decided was safer if I controlled it." Pip dragged the glove backward, tripped over his own rear feet, and fell into the kindling basket. Callan looked down. "That dog is a hazard. That dog is an unpaid morale officer. He's stealing government equipment. It is your glove. I feel governed." Elwyn sat at the table, expression softening around the edges. "Staying is not the same as being trapped." "It can be. So can leaving before anyone has the chance to expect you tomorrow." That landed. Callan looked toward Sable. She had lifted her head at Elwyn's voice, her torn ear tilted. Her amber eyes moved from one human to the other as if the cabin were a language she had begun to learn. Elwyn said, "You gave her exits before asking her to trust the room." Callan said nothing. "Maybe you could do the same for yourself." The rehook came the following week, not in a meeting, not in a rescue, but on a quiet afternoon when the snow had begun to soften around the edges of the yard. Callan had taken Sable to the assay station for the first time since the rescue, intending only to walk her around the outside and leave. The reinforced entrance to the lower stair had been fitted with a locked gate. No one asked her to approach it. No one spoke her name in that tone people used when they wanted courage to perform for them. Sable stopped near the stone steps. Pip, now several months old and mostly legs, bounced through old snow behind Callan with a stolen rag in his mouth. He froze when his mother stopped, then sat down so suddenly that he tipped backward into a drift and emerged offended but still armed with the rag. Callan stood 10 feet from the stair. Sable looked at him once. Then she stepped forward, one paw onto the first stone. Her body tightened. The scar along her hip drew beneath her coat. Her torn ear went flat. Cold air rose from the passage, carrying the smell of water, iron, old timber, and memory. Callan did not move. Sable placed a second paw down, then a third. She stood there, halfway inside the threshold of what had once taken choice from her. No line pulled her. No hand commanded her. No hunger drove her forward. Pip waited behind Callan, quiet for once, as if even his tiny chaos understood the shape of the moment. Sable lowered her nose and breathed in. Stone, water, rust, dark. Then she turned around, slowly, deliberately. She climbed out of the stairwell and walked back to Callan. Not running, not collapsing, not conquered, finished. For today. When she reached him, Callan lowered his hand. Sable stepped beneath it and leaned the side of her head into his palm. The gesture lasted longer than permission. That evening, Callan signed the contract. He told no one the reason. Everyone knew anyway. Spring came late to Clearwater Bend. It came in dirty snowbanks, dripping gutters, patches of brown grass, and the first brave birds arguing in the pines. It came in muddy boots at the assay station and water samples logged every morning. It came in June's articles about monitoring numbers instead of heroes. It came in Harlan arriving every Tuesday with old maps and insults for anyone who folded them wrong. It came in Rowan training volunteers to read danger before pride could misname it. It came in Sable gaining weight. It came in Pip becoming a glorious menace. Pip chewed 3 bootlesses, 1 measuring tape, the corner of Elowen's medical form, and a wool hat Harlan claimed had survived 27 winters before being murdered by a decorative wolf with no work ethic. Pip also learned to tumble down shallow snowbanks, bark at his reflection in the assay station window, and fall asleep with his cream paw over Sable's nose. Sable allowed all of it with the exhausted dignity of mothers everywhere. The wooden sign went up in April. June painted the letters herself on a sanded plank, while Callan held it steady and pretended not to care whether it was level. No wounded thing should have to carry the truth alone. Harlan read it and grunted. Long sign. June stepped back, paint on her fingers. It's a long truth. Elowen stood nearby with 2 paper cups of coffee. I like it. You like wounded things, Harlan said. I tolerate cranky ones. Rowan, passing with a coil of rope, said, then Harlan's safe. Pip ran between them with a glove in his mouth. Callan recognized the glove as his. He did not chase him. That was growth of a kind. A week later, on a morning bright enough to make the whole valley look newly made, Callan walked the old mine road where everything had begun. Sable walked ahead of him. Pip bounded behind her, no longer the tiny bundle carried through death-white snow, but a growing German shepherd pup with oversized paws, a blackening saddle, a pale paw still flashing when he ran, and the absolute conviction that every drift existed for his personal conquest. The snow along the road had thinned. Patches of earth showed through. Meltwater whispered beneath ice crusts. The pine trees dripped. The warning fence at Silverpine stood repaired above them, not as a lie that danger was gone, but as a promise that danger would no longer be ignored. Callan stopped at the bend. He knew the place. His body knew it before his mind named it. This was where he had first seen the blood. There was no red now, only soft tracks in melting snow, Sable's, Pip's, and his own. The sight did something to him that words would have spoiled. Sable turned back. Her amber eyes met his. Pip charged past both of them, misjudged the edge of a snowbank, vanished chest-deep, and emerged with a triumphant bark as if he had defeated a white dragon in single combat. Callan laughed, not much, not loudly, but enough that Sable's ears lifted and Pip barked again, pleased to have discovered this new command. Callan looked towards Silverpine Ridge. The mountain stood quiet under the pale sun, not innocent, not forgiven, but witnessed. He thought of the cabin as it had been. 1 mug, 1 chair, 1 man arranging loneliness into order and calling it safety. He thought of Sable crossing the snow with Pip in her mouth, her body broken but her purpose unbroken. He thought of Elowen's hands, June's courage, Lydia's return, Owen's confession, Rowan's discipline, Harlan's maps, and the town that had chosen a painful truth over a comfortable lie. Sable came back to his side. She did not lean this time. She simply stood there. That was enough. Callan understood then that Sable had never saved the town with magic. She had done what mothers do when the world becomes cruel. Carried the smallest life forward, step after bleeding step, until someone finally saw. And perhaps that was how grace often arrived. Not in thunder, not in victory songs, but limping through snow, holding life gently between its teeth, and asking a wounded man whether he still remembered how to open a door. Sometimes God does not send miracles wrapped in light. Sometimes he sends them limping through the snow, carrying a tiny life in their mouth, asking one wounded heart to open the door. In our daily lives, we may never face an old mountain or a buried mine, but we all meet moments when silence feels easier than responsibility, when fear tells us to look away, and when one small act of mercy can change more than we understand. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Or share a moment when love, faith, or courage helped you through a difficult season. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe to The Last Seal Shepherd for more stories of loyalty, healing, and second chances. May God bless you, protect your home, guide your heart, and give you enough light to keep the door open for someone who needs it.